After my wife passed away, I inherited a dilapidated farm while my son kept the $3.5 million mansion in Southern Hills. The day he read the will, he called me a useless old man and told me I had 22 days to get out of his life. With nowhere else to go, I drove 2 hours to the countryside and unlocked a farmhouse I had never seen before. But when the rusty door slowly opened, what I saw inside left me speechless. Hey everyone, welcome to today's story. Before we begin, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Quick note, this story includes fictional elements for storytelling purposes, but the message behind it is what truly matters. Now, let's see what Sam discovered. The mahogany table feels enormous tonight, wider than I remember. It stretches between us like a quiet barrier no one is willing to cross. Helen Sinclair sits at the head, her leather portfolio open neatly in front of her. A pair of reading glasses rests low on her nose as she studies the pages. I sit on one side of the table. Across from me are Walter and Jessica, my son and his wife, both leaning forward with the tense excitement of people waiting for the final reveal on a game show. It has been 7 days since Harold died. 7 days of silence. 7 days of neighbors bringing casseroles and murmuring condolences I barely heard. 7 days of Walter telling everyone he was handling the arrangements, which mostly meant pacing the hallway on his phone while I sat alone by the window staring at the driveway. And now we're here. Helen clears her throat softly. The sound snaps the room into focus. Thank you both for coming, she says in her calm, practiced voice. We'll proceed with the reading of Harold Caldwell Rutherford's last will and testament. Executed October 18th, 2022, 6 months before she passed. She knew something was coming. She had time to prepare. Helen adjusts her glasses and begins. To my beloved son, Walter James. Rutherford. Walter straightens instantly. Jessica reaches for his hand beneath the table, squeezing it with quiet anticipation. I leave the family residence located at 4217 Brentwood Circle, Southern Hills, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Appraised value $3.5 million. Jessica lets out a small gasp. Walter doesn't smile, but his eyes flash with satisfaction. Helen continues without pausing. Additionally, the investment portfolio managed by Sterling Wealth Management, current value $6 million. And the entirety of my retirement accounts through Morrison Energy Solutions, current value $2.5 million. I do the math automatically. Teacher habit, $12 million. All of it to Walter. Helen turns another page. To my husband, Stanley Rutherford. My heart thumps heavily against my ribs. This is the moment. I leave the family property located in Osage County, Oklahoma. 800 acres including farmhouse and outbuildings. County appraisal $180,000. The room goes completely silent. Walter blinks once. Wait, he says slowly. What? Helen looks up calmly. The Osage County property. Your mother inherited it from her grandparents. It has remained in the Caldwell family since 1947. Walter leans back in his chair. I watch his expression change, first confusion, then calculation, and finally something close to disgust. A farm, he says. That's it, Walter. I begin. Dad gets a dirt farm. He laughs the sound sharp and ugly. Mom left him a collapsing shack and 800 acres of empty land. Jessica touches his arm. Honey, no. This is ridiculous. Walter turns toward Helen. There has to be a mistake. Dad can't even manage that place. He's a retired high school teacher. He doesn't know the first thing about farming. That land is worthless. Helen's face remains completely neutral. The will is very clear, she says calmly. Your mother was extremely specific about the distribution. Walter shakes his head with disbelief. Specific, he mutters. Yeah, that's one way to put it. I know I should speak. I should defend Harold somehow. But my throat feels tight and the words won't come. Why the farm? Harold never mentioned it once. I've never even seen it. Helen continues reading. There is also a sealed letter addressed to Stanley, she says, sliding an envelope across the table. Your wife left instructions that it must be opened at the property. The envelope is cream-colored thick. Harold's handwriting is unmistakable. Sam open at the farm. Trust me. My hands tremble as I pick it up. Walter pushes his chair back abruptly. This is unbelievable, he says. I'm calling a lawyer. Helen folds her hands patiently. That is certainly your right. But I will tell you now, your wife's estate plan was drafted by one of the most respected attorneys in Oklahoma. The will is ironclad. Contesting it will cost you a great deal of money and produce the exact same result. Walter stares at her, then turns to me. Dad, he says, you're not actually going to accept this, are you? My voice cracks. I clear my throat. Your mother wanted me to have the farm. The farm? He repeats the word, dripping with contempt. You're 68 years old. What exactly are you going to do there? Live in some broken-down shack in the middle of nowhere? I don't know, I say quietly. I haven't seen it yet. Jessica stands and places a gentle hand on Walter's shoulder. We should go, she says softly. Let your dad process everything. Walter grabs his coat. At the door he stops and turns back toward me. You know what, Dad, he says. Fine, enjoy your farm. But don't come crying to me when you realize Mom left you with nothing but a massive tax bill. The door slams behind them. For a long moment, Helen and I sit in silence. She slowly removes her glasses and rubs the bridge of her nose. I'm sorry you had to witness that, I say. She sighs lightly. I've seen worse. Then she looks at me with something close to sympathy. Sam, your wife, loved you very much. I worked with her for more than a year on this estate plan. She was extremely deliberate about every detail. I just don't understand why she... Open the letter when you reach the farm, Helen says gently. She wanted you to see it there first. I nod, though nothing about this makes sense yet. Helen reaches into her portfolio and places a rusted key in front of me. This opens the farmhouse, she says. Osage County, about 2 hours west. The address is included in the deed. The key feels heavy in my hand, old, solid, the kind people stopped making decades ago. One more thing, Helen adds. Your wife told me you might have questions later. If that happens, call me, anytime. Thank you, I say quietly. Later that evening, I drive back to the house. No, not my house anymore. Walter owns it now. The same house where Harold and I lived for 18 years. The same house where she died in our bedroom, holding my hand and whispering her last strange words. Trust the farm, Sam. Everything you need is there. I didn't understand then. I still don't understand now. It's nearly 8 when Walter arrives home. I'm in the guest room packing what little I could salvage from my office before contractors started tearing out Harold's shelves. Walter doesn't knock. He simply walks in holding a folder. We need to talk. I sit on the edge of the bed. All right, he hands me the folder. Eviction notice, he says flatly. Legal and official. You have until March 29th to vacate the property. I stare at the paper. 22 days. Walter, this is my house now. Dad, he interrupts. Jessica and I are planning to start a family. We need the space. He folds his arms. You've got the farm. Go live there. I haven't even seen it yet. Then you better go look. He pauses at the doorway. Oh, and one more thing, he says casually. Don't take anything valuable when you leave. I made an inventory list. The silver, the artwork, Mom's jewelry, it all belongs to me. It was inside the house. Walter. But he's already walking away. I sit alone in the guest room of what used to be my home. In one hand, I hold the eviction notice. In the other, the rusted key. Outside, I hear Walter laughing on the phone. I look down at the envelope Helen gave me. Harold's handwriting stares back at me. Trust me. Harold, I whisper into the empty room. What did you leave me? The key feels heavier every second. 22 days until I'm forced to leave. 22 days to discover why the woman I loved for 40 years left me 800 acres of land in the middle of nowhere. The roar of diesel engines drags me out of a restless sleep. 6 in the morning, and the whole house is already vibrating. For a moment, I lie still confused, staring at the ceiling. Then the sound grows louder, metal clanking engines idling, men shouting directions. I swing my legs off the bed and stumble to the window. 3 contractor trucks fill the driveway. White vans with Morrison Brothers Construction painted across the sides. Men in hard hats are unloading equipment, toolboxes, extension cords, steel crowbars. A large rolling dumpster scrapes across the driveway with a harsh metallic screech. On the front porch stands Walter. He's wearing a suit like he's headed to a board meeting. One hand holds a coffee mug. The other gestures casually toward the east wing of the house, Harold's office. My chest tightens. I throw on yesterday's clothes and hurry downstairs. The front door is wide open, letting cold March air spill into the hallway. Heavy boots pound against the hardwood floors. Excuse me, I begin. One of the workers nearly collides with me as he rushes past carrying a power drill. Morning, sir, he says quickly. You might want to stay clear. demo day, demo day. He says it the way someone might say moving day or paint day. Just another routine job. I follow the noise down the hallway. Harold's office door is wide open. Two workers are already emptying the bookshelves, pulling volumes down in armfuls and tossing them into black trash bags. A third man is unscrewing the brass nameplate from the door. C. Rutherford, CEO. Wait, my voice cracks. Those are her books, her dad. Walter appears behind me, still sipping his coffee. These guys are on a schedule, he says calmly. Let them work. You didn't tell me they were coming today. I told you renovations start this week. He shrugs. This is week 1. A worker lifts a framed photograph from Harold's desk. It's the ribbon-cutting ceremony from Morrison Energy's first office in 1997. Harold is wearing a white hard hat, smiling like she's just conquered the world. I'm standing beside her, clapping like the proud husband I was. Wait, I say quickly. That one, can I have that? The worker pauses and looks at Walter. Walter looks back at me. The frame is sterling silver, he says. $1,800. I don't want the frame, I say. I want the photo. The photo's in the frame. Walter nods toward the hallway. Dumpster. The worker walks past me without hesitation. I watch the photograph disappear around the corner. Another worker jams a crowbar into the drawers of Harold's desk. Wood splinters loudly. Something inside my chest cracks along with it. Walter, please, your bedroom's next, he says casually. Movers arrive at noon to clear it out. Guest room? Only remember, I can't watch anymore. I retreat upstairs, the sounds of demolition echoing behind me like distant thunder. In the guest room, I sit on the narrow bed. 21 days until I have to leave this house. I pull out my wallet. Inside is the one thing I made sure to take yesterday, a photograph. Harold and me on our wedding day. June 18th, 1983. I was 28, a high school history teacher, making $26,000 a year. Harold was 24, fresh out of graduate school, with a geology degree and a job offer from an oil company I'd never even heard of. We got married at the courthouse. No reception. No fancy ceremony. Just 2 witnesses and a weekend honeymoon in Branson. 2 years later, Walter was born. I took a week off from teaching. Harold stayed home for 3 months before returning to work. She hated sitting still. She loved field work, the rigs, the negotiations, the endless travel. I never minded. I loved teaching. Loved summers off. Loved knowing our son had a mother who was brilliant and ambitious and never apologized for it. In 1995, Harold started her own company, that Morrison Energy Solutions. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when she told me. We have a mortgage, I said, and a 10-year-old kid. She just smiled. Sam. She said, I know this industry. I know how to do this. She was right. By the year 2000, she was a millionaire. By 2005, we bought the Southern Hills house. I was still teaching. She offered several times to let me retire early, but I always refused. I liked my classroom. I liked my students. Walter grew up in that house. Private schools, new cars, ski trips in Colorado. Somewhere along the way, I watched him drift away from us. Or maybe just away from me. Money fascinated him more than people ever did. Then came August 2021. Harold came home from a doctor's appointment, sat down at the kitchen table, and said 4 words that changed everything. It's stage 3 cancer. The doctors gave her 18 months, maybe less. I retired immediately. From that day on, every hour belonged to her. But even as the treatments drained her strength, Harold kept secrets. Trips to Osage County she wouldn't explain. Meetings with Helen Sinclair behind closed doors. Her office door locked more and more often. What are you working on? I asked once. Just tying up loose ends, she said with a tired smile. Don't worry, I should have pushed harder. But she was fighting for every breath. I couldn't bring myself to add more weight to her shoulders. February 27th, 2023. Hospice bed in our bedroom. Walter visited for 20 minutes. Then he stepped outside to take a phone call and never came back in. That night, Harold could barely speak, but she reached for my hand and pulled me closer. Sam, she whispered. Yes, trust the farm. The farm in Osage County. Her fingers tightened weakly around mine. Everything you need is there. Harold, don't let Walter take it, she whispered. Promise me. I didn't understand, but I promised anyway. I won't let him take it. Her eyes closed slowly. I love you, she murmured. 40 years wasn't enough. It was everything I said. She died the next morning, February 28th. 64 years old. The funeral was small. Helen Sinclair attended. A few executives from Morrison Energy came, and one unexpected guest. Victor Hartman, Harold's longtime competitor in the oil business. He stood in the back of the room during the service, silent, watching. He never approached me, never offered condolences. At the time I thought it was strange, but grief has a way of making everything feel unreal. Now, sitting in the guest room, I hear the drills downstairs again. They're tearing apart Harold's office, the place where she built an empire. I look down at the wedding photo in my hands. She's 24 in that picture, fearless, smiling, ready to take on the world. "I don't know what you left me, Harold," I whisper, "but I trust you." March 14th, 16 days left before I have to leave this house for good. I was carrying the final cardboard box out to my car when Walter pulled into the driveway. His black sedan rolled to a smooth stop behind me, and a second vehicle followed close behind, a silver Lexus that gleamed in the pale morning sunlight. The passenger door opened. A thin man in a navy suit stepped out, smoothing the front of his jacket before closing the door. He looked to be in his mid-50s with a sharp nose, perfectly combed gray hair, and a leather briefcase clutched under his arm. Walter walked beside him toward the house. "Dad," Walter said when they reached the porch. "This is Richard Moss. He specializes in elder care planning." The man nodded politely. "Mr. Rutherford." Walter pushed open the front door without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." I set the box down slowly. "About what?" "Your future." Inside, Walter led us to the dining room. The same dining room where Harold and I had celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and Christmas dinners for nearly 2 decades. Now the table was bare, except for a blue folder that Moss carefully placed in the center. He opened it with practiced efficiency, spreading several documents neatly across the polished wood. The top page caught my eye immediately. "General Durable Power of Attorney." The words were printed in bold capital letters. Moss folded his hands together and spoke in a voice as smooth and measured as a news anchor. "Mr. Rutherford, your son, has expressed concern regarding your well-being. This document authorizes him to manage your financial affairs, property holdings, and medical decisions while you transition into a safer living arrangement." I pulled the paper closer and read the first lines. The language was dense and formal. "The principal hereby grants the agent irrevocable authority over all bank accounts, real property, including parcels in Osage County investment portfolios and healthcare decisions. Effective immediately upon execution." My eyes stopped on one word. "Irrevocable," I said slowly. "That means I can't change my mind." Moss gave a calm nod. "That is correct. It ensures continuity and stability for everyone involved." I turned to the next page. Near the middle of the document, a paragraph had been highlighted in bright yellow. Section 12, Emergency Guardianship. In the event the principal is deemed unable to manage his own affairs, the agent may petition the court for full guardianship without prior notice. My chest tightened. I looked up at Walter. "You want control of everything," I said quietly, "including the farm." Walter leaned forward across the table, resting his elbows on the polished surface. "Dad, the county filed a tax lien," he said. $15,000 in unpaid property taxes. If you don't pay it by May 21st, the property gets auctioned." He tapped the document with one finger. "If you sign this, I'll take care of it. The taxes, the bills, everything. You won't have to worry about any of it." And if I don't sign, Moss tilted his head slightly as though he'd been waiting for the question. "In that case," he said smoothly, "we proceed under Oklahoma Statute 30-3-101. He paused for emphasis. "Your son can petition the court for emergency guardianship. Given that you're 68 years old, recently widowed, living alone, and currently without a stable income, a judge would very likely grant temporary control of your assets within 72 hours. I stared at Walter. For just a moment I saw him the way he used to be, 8 years old, standing beside the kitchen sink, crying because his goldfish had stopped moving. "Dad," he had asked, "does it hurt when they stop swimming?" The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared. Now he was just a man in an expensive suit staring back at me without a trace of hesitation. "You'd really do that?" I asked quietly. "I'm trying to help you," Walter said flatly. "You're not thinking clearly." I closed the folder. Then I slid it slowly back across the table. "Get out." Moss rose immediately, snapping his briefcase shut with a crisp click. Walter remained seated for another moment, studying me. "You've got 2 weeks, he said at last. He stood and straightened his jacket. "Think about it. Because if you don't sign that document, I'll file the petition, and a judge will make the decision for you. Neither of them waited for a response. The front door slammed a moment later. Through the window, I watched the silver Lexus pull away from the curb. The house fell silent again. 5 days passed. March 19th. I was clearing the last of my things from the guest room when I noticed the recycling bin sitting near the curb. Walter had been throwing papers away all week. Old files folders, anything he considered clutter. The bin was overflowing. A manila folder slipped out and landed on the driveway as I dragged the container closer. The tab read, Dad, Residential Options. Jessica's looping handwriting. I opened the folder. Inside were glossy brochures. Sunset Meadows, Senior Living, Elk City, Oklahoma. The cover showed a low brick building surrounded by dull brown grass. Inside were photos of a dining hall with fluorescent lighting plastic trays and elderly residents sitting silently in wheelchairs, while a muted television flickered on the wall. Beneath the brochures was a contract. Resident name, Stanley Rutherford. Accommodation, shared occupancy, Wing B, monthly rate, $2,800. Security deposit, $5,600, non-refundable. My stomach twisted. Then I saw the next line. Move-in date, April 20th, 2023. Authorized by Walter Rutherford, power of attorney. The signature space for resident was blank. Waiting. Waiting for me to sign the blue folder Moss had brought. Then something else caught my attention. The date printed at the bottom of the contract. January 28th, 2023. I read it again slowly. January 28th. 1 month before Harold died. While she was still alive, while she was lying upstairs in hospice care, struggling for every breath she had left. Walter had already signed the paperwork to send me away. My hands began to tremble. I pulled out my phone and typed Sunset Meadows, Elk City, Oklahoma reviews. The results loaded instantly. 2.1 stars, 47 reviews. I opened the first one. My father was left in a soiled bed for 6 hours. Staff ignored the call button completely. The next one. The food is terrible. My mother lost 12 pounds in 2 months. When I complained, they said she was adjusting. Another. Roaches in the bathroom. Management promised exterminators. Nothing happened. Another. My mother's wedding ring disappeared from her room. Staff claims she lost it. No investigation. I photographed every page in the folder. The contract, the brochures, every review. Then I walked quietly out to my car. I opened the trunk and slid the folder beneath a wool blanket and an old metal toolbox. Hidden. Safe. Back inside the house, I sat on the edge of the narrow guest bed. 11 days left. Walter had planned all of this while Harold was still alive. The lawyer, the facility, the legal documents, the timeline. Everything was already in place. All he needed now was my signature. I reached for the framed photo on the nightstand. Harold stood beside the first Morrison Energy Oil derrick in 1996, wearing her hard hat and grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Did you know?" I whispered quietly. "Did you see this coming?" Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the street. A truck rumbled past the house. I placed the photo carefully inside my duffel bag, turned off the bedside lamp, and lay back on the bed in the dark. The house creaked softly around me. 11 days. 11 days until I could leave this place. 11 days until I discovered what Harold had truly left waiting for me at that farm in Osage County. March 27th, 2 days left. The envelope arrived in the afternoon mail, thick cream-colored, stamped with the return address of the Osage County tax assessor. I tore it open beside the mailbox, the paper stiff in my hands. The words inside were printed in bold black letters. Notice of delinquent property. Tax property. 800 acres. Section 14, Township, 25, North Range, 8 East owner, Stanley Rutherford. Amount due, $18,577. 43 deadline, May 21st, 2023. Penalty for non-payment property, subject to public auction per Oklahoma statute. Title 68, Section 3125. I read the notice once, then again. $18,577, due in less than 2 months. My teacher's pension paid $2,100 a month. Even if I stopped buying groceries, stopped paying utilities, stopped doing anything except breathing, I still couldn't cover that bill. I folded the paper slowly and walked back inside. Walter was in the living room scrolling through something on his phone. The television was muted behind him. "Got something in the mail," I said. He glanced up briefly. "The lien?" he asked. I handed him the notice. He barely looked at it before handing it back. "Yeah," he said. "The county line. I told you about that last week. You said 15,000. I rounded down." He shrugged casually. "Penalties and fees stack up fast." He placed his phone on the coffee table and leaned back against the couch. "Look, Dad, I've been thinking about the situation." I waited. "You can't pay that," he continued. "And honestly, that farm isn't worth anything anyway. 800 acres of dirt and a collapsing farmhouse in the middle of nowhere." He clasped his hands together. "But I'm willing to help you out. How I'll buy it from you." The words hung in the air. $50,000, Walter said. "Cash." I stared at him. 50,000, more than it's worth, he said quickly. "Trust me, I'm being generous. And the taxes, I'll deal with them," Walter said. "Think of it as a family favor." I slipped the notice back into my jacket pocket. "I'll think about it." Walter had already picked up his phone again. "Deadline's May 21st, he added casually. "After that, the county auctions the property and you get nothing." I walked upstairs without responding. That evening, my phone rang. Helen Sinclair. "Sam," she said when I answered. "Do you have a minute?" I stepped out onto the back porch. The yard was dark now. The flower bed Harold once cared for reduced to a patch of churned dirt after Walter had the landscaping torn up. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I've got a minute." "I heard Walter made you an offer for the farm. 50,000, I said. "How did you hear about that?" "Because he called my office this afternoon," Helen replied. "He asked if the estate could waive the tax lien, and I told him no. The lien is legitimate and Harold's instructions were very clear. The farm belongs to you." I leaned against the porch railing. "Helen, I can't pay $18,000. My pension barely covers rent." "I know," she said gently. "But Sam, that property is worth far more than Walter is offering. Do not sell it. Not to him, not to anyone. Not yet." I tightened my grip on the railing. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "You go to the farm on March 29th, she said, "exactly the way Harold asked you to. And open the envelope." "Yes." "Helen," I said, frustration creeping into my voice, "I need more than riddles. If I lose that land, you won't." Her tone changed firm now, unmistakably certain. "Sam, 18 months ago, Harold placed the farm inside an irrevocable trust. The property is titled entirely in your name." I blinked. "No power of attorney can touch it," Helen continued. "No probate court can seize it. No creditor can claim it. Legally speaking, Walter has absolutely no authority over that land." I lowered myself slowly into one of the porch chairs. "Then why is he pushing so hard to buy it? Because he knows something you don't," Helen said. She paused. "And Harold knew he would come after it. There's more inside that envelope than you realize," she continued. "Trust her. Just 2 more days." "What about the tax lien?" I asked. "What if the county auctions the property before?" "Then they won't," Helen replied calmly. "The trust includes a provision specifically covering delinquent taxes." I already filed an extension request with the assessor's office this morning. My chest loosened slightly. "You now have until June 30th to settle the lien." "You're sure, absolutely sure," she said. Harold anticipated everything. Her voice softened. "Sam, I can't tell you what's inside that envelope. She made me promise not to. But I can tell you this. She spent the last 2 years preparing for this exact moment. She knew Walter would try what he's trying now. Don't let him win." I looked out across the dark yard. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Headlights slid across the fence as a car passed slowly by. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll wait. Good. And Sam." "Yes, don't sign anything. Not the power of attorney, not a sales contract, nothing. If Walter pressures you again, call me immediately." "I will. 2 days," she said. "Then you'll understand everything." The line went silent. I sat on the porch long after the call ended, the tax notice heavy in my pocket, Helen's words circling endlessly in my mind. The farm is worth far more than Walter thinks. The next morning I drove to Helen's office. She was waiting in the conference room when I arrived. A single manila envelope sat on the table in front of her, the same size as the sealed envelope she had given me during the will reading. She slid it across the table. "This is the second letter," she said. "Harold left instructions that I give it to you on March 28th. One day before you opened the sealed envelope at the farm, I picked it up carefully. My name was written across the front in Harold's handwriting. Strong, slanted, impossible to mistake. "What's inside it?" I asked. Helen shook her head. "I don't know." She sealed it herself. She folded her hands on the table. "But she asked me to remind you of 3 things. First, Helen said the farm is protected. Second, you have more resources than you realize." She paused before continuing. "And third, she told me to tell you this. Tell him I'm still looking out for him even now." My throat tightened. I nodded slowly. Helen stood and walked me to the door. "Go to the farm tomorrow, Sam," she said. "Open both envelopes, and don't let Walter follow you." I left her office holding the envelope carefully against my chest. My thoughts spun in circles the entire drive back. The farm is worth far more. Irrevocable trust. Everything you need is there. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for several minutes staring at Harold's handwriting. The sun was sinking behind the buildings across the street, casting long shadows across the asphalt. 2 blocks away, a church bell rang. 6 slow chimes. I thought about the tax notice, Walter's $50,000 offer, the power of attorney document, the brochures for Sunset Meadows, the blue folder. Then another memory surfaced. Harold, standing in a wheat field outside Osage County the summer before she became sick. She had one hand raised to shield her eyes from the bright sun. She had smiled at me that day. "This land has always been good to us, Sam," she said. "It's got one more gift left." I started the engine. One more day. Tomorrow I would finally discover what Harold had been protecting me from, and what she had left waiting for me at the farm. March 28th, 1 day left. I woke to the grinding roar of a diesel engine in the backyard. I threw on jeans and stumbled downstairs. Through the kitchen window I saw a yellow bulldozer tearing through Harold's rose garden. I ran outside barefoot. "Stop, stop." The operator, a kid in a high-vis vest, killed the engine. Walter appeared from around the side of the house, clipboard in hand. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "Landscaping crew," Walter said calmly. "I'm putting in a pool, breaking ground today." "That's Harold's garden." "It was Harold's garden. This is my house now." He turned to the operator. "Keep going." The engine roared back to life. The blade bit into the soil, ripping through tea roses, lavender, daylilies. 20 years of careful planting torn up in seconds. I stood frozen, chest-tight, fists clenched. Then I saw it, one bush still standing at the far edge untouched. The yellow rose. Harold had planted it on our 25th wedding anniversary, June 18th, 2008. She'd chosen yellow because it was the color she wore the day we met. Every June, it bloomed bright as sunlight. I walked past Walter, past the bulldozer, and knelt in the dirt. The bush was small, maybe 3 feet tall, roots shallow. I started digging with my hands. "Dad, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I dug faster, scooping soil, tearing roots free. My fingers hit a rock. I shoved it aside. The bush came loose. I lifted it carefully, cradling the root ball dirt crumbling down my forearms. Walter stepped closer. "You can't take that?" I turned and looked at him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I walked past him toward my truck, the rose bush in my arm soil trailing behind me like a wound. "Dad." I kept walking. I laid the bush gently in the truck bed, wrapped the roots in a tarp I found behind the seat, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, Walter stood in the driveway, phone to his ear, watching me leave. That afternoon, I replanted the yellow rose in a whiskey barrel on the farmhouse porch. The house was small, wood frame, badly weathered porch, sagging paint, peeling screens torn. But it was quiet. And it was mine. I watered the rose until the soil darkened, then sat on the porch steps and stared at the fields. 800 acres of wheat stubble stretched to the horizon. No neighbors. No bulldozers. Just wind and sky. I thought about the sealed envelope waiting inside Helen's words. "Everything you need is there," and Harold's voice echoing in my head. "Trust the farm. One more day." Tomorrow I'd open it. Tomorrow I'd know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on an old cot in the front room, windows open, listening to crickets. Around 11, I heard my phone buzz. A text from Walter. "Thought about my offer, 50,000 is on the table until Friday." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. I saw Walter's name on the screen. I almost declined, then stopped. Something made me answer and mute my side immediately. Walter didn't know I was listening. "Yeah, I'm at the house." His voice was low, tense. "He drove out to that dump today. Took a damn rose bush." A pause. Someone else was talking, but I couldn't hear them. I know, but the tax lien's only $18,000. If he figures out what's under that land. Another pause. Drilling rights, the whole section. If he finds out before I get him to sign, we lose the leverage. My pulse quickened. I fumbled for the voice recorder app on my phone and hit record. Guardianship petition's ready. Moss said we can file Monday if he doesn't sell. Then we move him into that place in Elk City and I take over as conservator. After that, the land's ours. I barely breathed. No, he doesn't suspect. Helen's been feeding him some line about a trust, but she doesn't know the whole picture. Neither does he. Walter laughed short, bitter. Guy taught high school for 40 years. He has no idea what he's sitting on. Silence. Then Walter again. Friday. If he doesn't sell by Friday, we go to court. I'm not waiting anymore. The call ended. I sat in the dark, heart pounding, the recording still running. I stopped it and played it back. Walter's voice came through clear. Drilling rights, the whole section. Guardianship petition. Move him into that place in Elk City. I saved the file, backed it up to the cloud, and labeled it March 28th. Walter call. Then I lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the wind rattled the screens. A coyote yipped somewhere far off. Walter wasn't offering $50,000 out of generosity. He was trying to steal something. Something under this land. Something worth more than he'd ever admit. And Harold had known. I thought of the sealed envelope in my duffel bag. The irrevocable trust. Helen's warning. The 25-year-old yellow rose now planted on the porch. Tomorrow I'd open that envelope. Tomorrow I'd find out what Harold had been protecting and what Walter was trying to take. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just listened to the wind and waited for dawn. March 29th. 6 in the morning. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the guest room, stretching long, pale beams across the bare wooden floor. The room felt hollow now. Most of the furniture had already been hauled away, leaving behind nothing but faint outlines in the dust where things once stood. I had packed everything I owned, one duffel bag, one cardboard box filled with books, and Harold's frame photograph wrapped carefully in a folded towel. Everything else in this house could belong to Walter now. I had no interest in taking anything more. I was folding my last shirt when something slipped from the pocket of Harold's old cardigan, the gray one she used to wear on cool mornings. I had taken it from her closet 2 weeks earlier, before Walter cleared out the entire room. A small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. I picked it up. It was torn from a notepad, the edges uneven. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. Check barn attic. Insurance box. Trust Helen and Earl. I read it again. Barn attic. I didn't even know the old barn had an attic. And who was Earl? For a moment I simply stood there staring at the note, my heart beating faster. Then I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet beside the photograph of Harold wearing her hard hat. After that, I walked downstairs one last time. The house felt empty in a way that went beyond missing furniture. These rooms had once held birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and the quiet arguments that come with raising a family. Now they were little more than hollow shells with scuffed floors and small nail holes where pictures used to hang. The leather couch in the living room was gone. The kitchen table where Harold and I drank coffee every Sunday morning was gone. Even the curtains had been taken down. I paused in the doorway of Harold's office. The bookshelves stood bare. The desk she had used for 20 years was gone. Only the faint rectangular outline remained on the hardwood floor where it had once stood. I remembered the bulldozer tearing through her rose garden, the contractors carrying away filing cabinets filled with decades of work, Walter dismantling 40 years of her life like it meant nothing. I turned away and walked to the front door. Walter was standing on the porch waiting for me. He leaned against the railing with his arms folded, his tie loosened in dark circles beneath his eyes. Leaving already, he asked. Yeah. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. Look, he said, holding it out. I know things have been tense. Let's finish this the right way. I didn't take it at first. $25,000, he said. Cash it today and walk away clean. I stared down at the check. 2 days ago, he had offered $50,000. Now it was half that. Desperation has a smell. Expensive cologne mixed with sweat. No, Walter sighed. Dad, be reasonable. That farm is falling apart. The land isn't worth anything. You're 68. You don't need the headache, he continued. Take the money, rent a nice apartment somewhere. Enjoy your retirement. For a long moment I studied his face. I searched for the boy who used to kneel beside Harold planting tulip bulbs in the spring. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The boy who used to call me every Sunday during his first year at college. But I couldn't find him anymore. I took the check from his hand, tore it once, then again, then into 4 pieces. I handed the scraps back to him. I'll take my chances. Walter's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. I lifted my duffel bag and walked toward the truck. Behind me, I heard Walter shout something, but I didn't stop to listen. I set the bag in the passenger seat, climbed into the driver's side, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see him standing on the porch, hands shoved into his pockets, watching as I drove away. I turned the corner at the end of the street, and I didn't look back. The drive to Osage County took just over 2 hours. Tulsa slowly faded behind me. The suburbs disappeared first, then the strip malls, then the traffic lights. Soon the road opened into wide stretches of countryside. Flat fields stretched for miles, barbed wire fences, clusters of oak trees, billboards advertising cattle auctions and church revivals. One handmade sign beside the road read, "Fresh eggs, $3 a dozen." I passed through Skiatook, then Hominy, each town smaller than the last. Grain elevators rose against the sky like quiet monuments. Pickup trucks filled the parking lots of gas stations and diners. Around 8:30, I turned onto County Road 3700. The narrow 2-lane road sliced through endless wheat fields. The winter wheat was still young, bright green shoots no higher than my ankles. In a few months, it would turn gold. Right now, it looked fragile. 10 miles later, I saw the mailbox. Rutherford. The letters were painted in fading black. I turned onto the gravel drive. The farmhouse sat about a quarter mile from the road. Small, white, weathered. The paint peeled from the siding, and one corner of the roof sagged slightly. The porch steps leaned to one side. Behind the house stood the barn, a massive red structure tilted slightly left, half its roof rusted brown. I parked the truck and shut off the engine. Silence wrapped around the property. No traffic, no voices. Just wind moving through the wheat and the slow creak of the barn door swinging on a broken hinge. I stepped out and looked around. 800 acres. The land stretched in every direction, flat and empty, dotted with scrub oaks and leaning fence posts. The kind of land most people would drive past without even noticing. Walter was right about one thing. At first glance, it looked worthless. I thought about the torn check, the tax lien, the guardianship petition, and the phone call I had overheard days earlier. Drilling rights. The whole section. He has no idea what he's sitting on. I pulled Harold's note from my wallet. Check barn attic. Insurance box. My eyes moved toward the barn, then toward the farmhouse. The rusted key Helen had given me was still in my pocket. I climbed the crooked porch steps. The wood creaked beneath my boots. Beside the door sat the whiskey barrel, where I had planted the yellow rose the day before. It already looked stronger, alive. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. The door swung open slowly. Dust floated through the dim light inside. The air smelled of dry wood and old mice. The farmhouse was smaller than I expected. One main room serving as both kitchen and living space. A narrow bed tucked behind a curtain. A metal frame cot, a folding card table, and an old trunk pushed against the far wall. I stepped inside and closed the door. On the table sat 2 envelopes, one sealed with red wax from the will reading, the other, from Helen's office, my name written in Harold's familiar handwriting. I set down my duffel bag and walked slowly to the table. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. I picked up the sealed envelope. "All right, Harold," I whispered softly. "Show me." I broke the wax seal. But before I open that envelope and reveal what Harold left inside, leave a comment with the word trust. I want to know how many of you have stayed with this story all the way to this moment. Just a quick reminder, some details in this story have been dramatized to make the experience more vivid. If that kind of storytelling isn't for you, you're welcome to step away now. But if you want to know what Harold hid in that barn attic for 22 years, stay right here, because the truth is about to be revealed. March 29th, 3 in the afternoon, I sat alone at the small card table in the farmhouse, staring at the 2 envelopes lying in front of me. Outside, the wind swept across the wheat fields, rattling the loose boards of the old house. Every now and then, a stronger gust pushed against the walls, making the windows tremble softly in their frames. On the porch, the yellow rose I had planted the day before swayed gently inside its whiskey barrel. I reached for the first envelope. This one had come from Helen's office, the one she had handed me the previous afternoon. My name was written across the front in Harold's unmistakable handwriting. For a moment, I simply held it there. Then I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I unfolded it slowly. Sam. By the time you read this, you should already be at the farm. I'm sorry I couldn't explain everything while I was still alive. Some truths are safer written down than spoken aloud. Go to the barn. The attic access is in the northwest corner, hidden behind the hay bales. There's a trunk up there. The rusted key from the will reading will open it. Everything you need is inside. I love you. I always have. Gee, I read the note once. Then again. When I finished, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet beside the other note Harold had left, the one mentioning the insurance box. Then I grabbed a flashlight from the truck and walked toward the barn. The structure towered over the farmhouse. 3 stories of weathered red wood, its roof patched in places with sheets of rusted tin. The double doors hung crooked on heavy iron hinges. I grabbed one of them and pulled. The door groaned open like an old man rising slowly from bed. Inside, the air smelled of dry hay and motor oil. Strips of afternoon sunlight filtered through cracks in the wooden siding, casting long beams of gold across the dirt floor. In one corner sat an ancient tractor, its tires flat and engine covered in rust. Along the west wall were stacks of hay bales layered with dust. I moved toward the northwest corner of the barn. Behind the stacked bales, I discovered a narrow wooden ladder, nailed to the wall, disappearing upward into darkness. I climbed. The attic ceiling was low, forcing me to crouch slightly. Cobwebs hung in the corners, and the air carried the dry scent of old wood and forgotten seasons. I swept the beam of my flashlight across the space. Cardboard boxes, a broken wooden chair, and in the far corner, partially hidden beneath a faded canvas tarp, a trunk. I walked over and pulled the tarp aside. The trunk was military-style olive drab metal, reinforced with steel corners. A thick brass padlock held it shut. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the rusted key Helen had given me at the will reading. The key slid into the lock. I turned it. With a heavy click, the padlock opened. I lifted the lid. Inside were 4 folders stacked neatly in a row. Each one was labeled in Harold's careful handwriting. Geological Survey. Walter. Evidence marked with a red tab. Victor Hartman. Conspiracy blue tab. Trust documents resting on top of the folders was another envelope. My name was written across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. Sam, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm gone, and Walter has already tried to take the farm. There are 3 things you need to understand. First, Walter stole $370,000 from us over the past 18 months. He forged my signature on withdrawal slips, moved money through shell accounts, and lied repeatedly to our accountant. The red folder contains the evidence bank statements, surveillance photographs, forged paperwork. I discovered what he was doing in September 2022. I never confronted him. Instead, I began documenting everything. Second, Walter has been working with a rival oil executive since September 2021. Together, they plan to force you into a nursing facility, obtain control of the farm through a fraudulent guardianship petition, and then sell the land for drilling rights. The blue folder contains their emails, contracts, and wire transfers. Everything you will need to expose them. Third, this land sits directly above a Mississippi and lime shale formation. Geological surveys estimate roughly $25 million in recoverable oil beneath the property. I have already negotiated a partnership agreement with Morrison Energy. They will handle all drilling expenses. You will retain 75% of the net royalties. The estimated income will be between $2 and $3 million per year. The trust documents folder explains everything in detail. I transferred the farm into an irrevocable trust in your name 18 months ago. Walter cannot touch it. No power of attorney, no guardianship order, and no creditor can legally claim it. Section 47, C contains an ethics clause. If Walter contests the will, commits fraud, or collaborates with certain named individuals, he forfeits his entire inheritance and becomes subject to federal prosecution. Helen has copies of everything. She will help protect you. Sam, I know this hurts. I know you still want to believe Walter is the boy who helped me plant roses in the garden. But he isn't that boy anymore. He made his choices. Do not forgive him. Do not let him manipulate you again. Protect yourself. Protect this land. It's your future now. I love you more than I ever said out loud. Trust the farm. Harold. I read the letter once, then again, and a third time. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the paper down. $370,000. 18 months. Forged signatures. Shell accounts. All of it happening while Harold was fighting cancer, while she could barely walk across the bedroom without help. I opened the red folder. The first page was a timeline written neatly in Harold's handwriting. Walter Rutherford. Embezzlement. Timeline. July 15th, 2021, $45,000 withdrawn from Morrison Energy operating account. Forged signature authorization. Funds transferred to account ending in 7743 Walter personal account. November 3rd, 2021, $85,000 withdrawn from Joint Fidelity investment account. Forged power of attorney submitted to bank. Surveillance photo confirms Walter at teller window at 2:47 p.m. May 22nd, 2022, $120,000 withdrawn from retirement fund. Fraudulent hardship, claim used to bypass penalty. Notarized document signature inconsistent with known samples. January 10th, 2023, $120,000 withdrawn from Morrison Energy executive bonus account. Electronic transfer traced to Walter's home, office IP address. Total stolen, $370,000. Beneath the timeline were supporting documents, highlighted bank statements. Withdrawal slips carrying Harold's forged signature, the loops too tight, the slant wrong. Security photos from the Fidelity branch, showing Walter standing at the counter in a suit. And a hardship affidavit dated 3 days after Harold received her cancer diagnosis. At the bottom of the folder was a sticky note written in Harold's hand. Discovered September 12th, 2022. Monitored 6 months, documented everything. Let him think he got away with it. Set the trap. G. I closed the folder slowly. My stomach churned. I stood up too quickly and had to grab the edge of the trunk to steady myself. Walter had been stealing from us while Harold lay bedridden, while I was helping her to the bathroom, while I sat beside her at night, reading aloud from her favorite books. He had forged her name, lied to banks, drained our accounts while she was dying, and Harold had known. She had watched it happen, quietly documenting every transaction, every lie, every crime, building a case so airtight he wouldn't be able to escape it. I thought about the will reading, Walter sitting across from me, barely paying attention, checking his phone. I thought about the $50,000 offer, the $25,000 check I tore apart this morning. He hadn't been generous. He had been desperate. I sank down onto the attic floor, leaning back against the trunk. The red folder rested in my lap. Outside, a crow cried somewhere in the distance. The wind rattled the barn roof above my head. I whispered quietly into the dusty air, "You're not my son." Then I placed the letter in the red folder carefully back inside the trunk, closed the lid, and climbed down the ladder. Because now I had work to do. March 29th, 6 in the evening. I sat at the small card table inside the farmhouse, the open trunk resting beside me like a silent witness. The red folder still lay where I had placed it moments earlier, heavy with the weight of everything I had just learned. Outside, the sun was beginning to sink behind the distant wheat fields. Long shadows stretched across the land, and the golden light of evening slowly faded into something colder. The temperature had dropped quickly with the sunset. When I exhaled, I could see the faint mist of my breath in the air. For a moment, I simply sat there trying to steady my thoughts. Then I reached into the trunk and pulled out the blue folder. The tab read, Victor Hartman, Conspiracy. Harold's handwriting was sharp and angular, exactly the way it had always looked when she wrote something important. I opened the folder. The first page was a handwritten summary. Harold had dated it October 15th, 2022. Victor Hartman, background competitor in Oklahoma, oil and gas for 20 years. Lost 3 major lease bids to Morrison Energy between 2005 and 2018. Personal grudge. Attempted hostile acquisition of Morrison in 2016. Failed. Known for aggressive tactics, legal gray areas, and purchasing distressed properties at auction. Sam, this man hates me, and now he's using our son to destroy you. First contact with Walter. September 2nd, 2021. 18 months of coordination. Do not underestimate him. Do not negotiate. G. I read the words slowly, feeling the weight of each sentence settle into my chest. Then I turned the page. The next document was a printed email chain. Several lines were highlighted in yellow, with notes scribbled in the margins in Harold's handwriting. From v.hartman@hartmanoilgas.com to walterrutherford.cpa@. Date September 2nd, 2021, 11:42 p.m. Subject opportunity. Walter, we met briefly at the Tulsa Energy Forum last spring. I've been following your mother's company for years. Impressive operation. I'm reaching out because I believe there may be a business opportunity that benefits both of us. Your parents own an 800-acre parcel in Osage County. Geological data suggests there may be significant untapped reserves on that land. If you're interested in discussing a potential partnership, let's arrange a meeting, discreetly. Victor Hartman, CEO, Hartman Oil and Gas. Harold had circled the word discreetly. Next to it she had written red flag. He knew about the reserves before Walter did. I turned the page. Another email. September 9th, 2021, from walterrutherford.cpa@.2v.hartman@hartmanoilgas.com. Victor interested. Parents don't know the land's value. What are you proposing? Harold's note was written in the margin. Walter sold us out in one sentence. My jaw tightened. I continued reading. The next pages were screenshots of text messages printed and stapled together. October 2021. Victor, October 14th. 10:47 p.m. Need geological survey. Can you access your mother's files? Walter, October 14th. 11:03 p.m. She keeps everything locked. I'll try. Victor, October 22nd. 9:15 a.m. Time is money. Find a way. Walter, October 22nd. 10:08 a.m. Working on it. Beneath the printed messages was a bank transfer record. Date November 28th, 2021. Hartman Oil and Gas, LLC to Walter Rutherford. Amount $50,000. Memo line consulting services Harold had written beneath the record first payment. Walter became a paid informant against his own family. My hands tightened around the folder. I kept reading. The next document was an internal memo from Morrison Energy. It was stamped confidential, and Harold had attached a sticky note to the top. The note read, Geological survey disappeared from my office safe. January 10th, 2022. Only 3 people had the combination, me, Helen, and Walter. I changed the locks the same afternoon. 2 weeks later, Hartman Oil filed lease applications on adjacent parcels. Coincidence number. My chest tightened. I turned another page. This time it was a contract draft. Date February 18th, 2023. The letterhead read, Hartman Oil and Gas. Proposed acquisition agreement. I read every word carefully. Purchase agreement. Stanley Rutherford, seller, agrees to sell 800 acres located in Section 14, Township 25 North Range, Yar 8 East Osage County, Oklahoma, to Hartman Oil and Gas, LLC buyer for the sum of $500. 000. Seller relinquishes all mineral rights, surface rights, and future royalty claims. Buyer assumes full rights to drilling, exploration, and extraction. Estimated recoverable reserves $25 million. Seller receives no royalty participation. I stared at the numbers for a long time. $500,000. For land containing $25 million in oil. Harold had underlined the royalty clause and written in thick red ink beside it, theft. Below that, she added another note. Industry standard royalties range from 12 to 25%. Morrison Partnership gives you 75%. Victor's contract gives you 0. I slowly turned the page. Another email. Date March 3rd, 2023. Subject line final offer from v.hartman at Hartman Oil. Gas.com to walterrutherford.cpa @. Time to close this. Your mother's condition is declining. Once she's gone, we move quickly. I will pay you $5 million cash, grant you a vice president position at Hartman Oil, and give you 20% net royalties from the Osage parcel once we acquire it. In return, you ensure your father signs over the farm within 90 days of her passing. Use whatever leverage necessary, guardianship, nursing facility, financial pressure. I don't care how. Just get it done. Victor. Below it was Walter's reply. Same day. Victor, deal. I've already researched facilities. There's a place in Elk City called Sunset Meadows. $2,800 per month. If Dad resists, I'll file for emergency guardianship. My lawyer says it's a slam dunk given his age and recent loss. I'll have him sign a power of attorney and transfer the farm to me as conservator. Once it's mine, I'll sell to you for the agreed price. Target timeline April to May. Walter. I read the email twice. My hands began to shake. Walter had sold me, sold the farm, sold Harold's life's work, all for $5 million and a corporate title. And he had done it while she was dying. The final document in the folder was another handwritten note from Harold. It was dated September 30th, 2022. Sam, by now you've read the evidence. I know this must be unbearable, but you need to understand something important. I built a legal wall around you. The farm sits inside an irrevocable trust in your name. Walter cannot touch it. The ethics clause in Section 47C of the trust specifically names Victor Hartman. If Walter attempts any transaction with Victor or any company Victor controls, Walter immediately forfeits his inheritance and faces federal fraud charges. Helen has copies. The FBI has copies. It's ironclad. I've also finalized a partnership agreement with Morrison Energy. They will handle all drilling expenses. You receive 75% of all net royalties. Industry standard is between 12% and 25%. 75% is unheard of. I negotiated it because you deserve it. Because this land belongs to you. Victor's contract would have stolen everything. Do not negotiate with him. Do not negotiate with Walter. Let Helen handle it. Trust the people I trusted, Helen Morrison, Energy, and Earl Patterson. You'll meet Earl soon. And Sam, don't forgive Walter. I wanted to. I tried. But some betrayals run too deep. Protect yourself. I love you. Harold. I closed the folder slowly. The farmhouse had grown dark around me. Only the last red glow of the setting sun slipped through the window. For a long time, I sat there in silence, the blue folder resting in my lap, my chest hollow. Harold had fought a war I never even knew existed. While I was sitting beside her bed, reading aloud at night, she had been gathering evidence, building legal traps, negotiating contracts. Protecting me. Protecting this land. Protecting everything Walter and Victor tried to steal. Outside, the wind rose again, rustling the wheat fields. The yellow rose on the porch swayed in the fading light. Somewhere far down the county road, a truck engine rumbled past. I stood slowly. Then I placed the blue folder back inside the trunk beside the red one. Tomorrow, Walter and Victor would come. I could feel it. They would bring their final offer, or their final threat. But this time, I wouldn't be the man they thought I was. This time, I would be ready. March 29th, 7 in the evening. I was still sitting at the small card table inside the farmhouse, staring at the closed trunk beside me, when I heard the sound of boots on the porch steps. Slow, heavy. 3 deliberate knocks followed. I stood across the room and opened the door. A man stood under the weak yellow glow of the porch bulb. He looked to be in his 70s, maybe older. His face was deeply lined, the kind of weathered look you get from decades of sun wind and hard work. He wore a faded flannel shirt, work jeans, and dusty boots. In one hand, he carried a metal toolbox. In the other, a brown paper grocery sack. "Sam Rutherford," he asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously. He gave a short nod. "Name's Earl Patterson. I run the gas station about 5 miles east of here." He jerked his thumb toward the dark road behind him. "Harold asked me to keep an eye on this place. Figured you'd show up tonight." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." Earl walked inside without hesitation. He set the toolbox and grocery sack down on the card table where I'd been sitting. From the sack, he pulled out a thermos, a foil-wrapped sandwich, and a battery-powered lantern. "No electricity out here," he said matter-of-factly as he set the lantern down. "Well's dry, too. Thought you might need a little help getting through the night." He slid the lantern toward me. "Coffee and supper. Lantern should run about 12 hours. "Thank you," I said quietly. Earl studied my face for a moment, as if measuring something. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Harold gave me this about 6 months ago," he said. "Told me if you ever showed up here alone, I should hand it over." He placed the envelope on the table, said you'd probably need it. The envelope was thick, sealed. "She paid me to keep an eye on the farm," Earl continued. "Check the fences, run trespassers off if anybody wandered too close. Been doing that ever since she asked." He shrugged slightly. "Nobody's come around here except you." I opened the envelope. Inside were crisp stacks of $100 bills, 200 of them, $20,000. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Earl, I don't thank me, he interrupted calmly. Thank her. He nodded toward the trunk sitting beside the table. She spent the better part of 2 years getting ready for this. I looked at the trunk again. I don't know exactly what's in those folders, Earl continued. But I do know your boy and Victor Hartman have been around town these last 3 days asking questions. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions, mineral rights, Earl said. Been talking to the county clerk, the assessor's office. Even stopped by the drilling commission building down in Pawhuska. He folded his arms across his chest. They're circling. A cold feeling settled in my chest. How do you know all that? Earl gave a faint smile. Small town, he said. Everybody knows everybody's business. He leaned slightly closer. Harold told me if those two showed up asking questions, I was supposed to warn you. He paused. So, consider this your warning. The farmhouse creaked softly in the wind outside. They'll come here, Earl continued. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. His voice lowered. Don't sign anything they hand you. Don't make deals. Helen Sinclair's got your back. He tapped the table once. So do I. I nodded slowly. Harold told you about Helen. Earl chuckled quietly. She told me about a lot of things. Then he lifted the toolbox again. Oh, one more thing. He glanced toward the barn. You should check that attic again. My brow furrowed. Northwest corner, Earl said. Behind the insulation, there's a metal box up there marked insurance. He nodded toward the trunk again. Harold said you'd know what to do with it. He tipped his cap toward me. I'll come back in the morning with some water and a generator. Might take a couple hours to get it running, but we'll make this place livable. He pointed at the thermos. My phone number's written on the bottom of that if you need anything before then. He turned and started toward the door. Earl, I called. He paused and looked back. Thank you. He nodded once. Then he stepped outside and disappeared into the darkness. A few moments later, I heard his pickup truck start. The engine rumbled as he drove slowly down the gravel road. The sound faded into the distance. I stood in the doorway for another minute, listening to the wind moving through the wheat fields. Then I grabbed the flashlight from the table and headed back toward the barn. The attic looked exactly the same as it had earlier that afternoon. Dusty beams, low rafters, old boxes scattered around the corners. I moved to the northwest corner. Behind a sheet of pink fiberglass insulation, just like Earl had said, I found a small metal box. It was tucked tightly between two beams. I pulled it free and brushed away the dust. The word insurance was written across the lid in black marker. I opened it. Inside were photocopies of every document I had already seen in the trunk. The red folder evidence, the blue folder conspiracy files, copies of the trust paperwork. But there was something else. A small USB drive taped to the inside of the lid. A label read, Evidence, FBI copy. Beneath it lay a business card. I picked it up and read the name printed across the front. Special Agent Sarah Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crime, Division Oklahoma City, Field Office. I slipped the card into my wallet beside Harold's letters. Then I carried the metal box down from the attic. Outside the barn, the wind had picked up, rustling the wheat fields like distant waves. I walked back to the truck and locked the metal box safely inside the cab. When I returned to the farmhouse, the lantern cast a soft yellow glow across the small room. I poured a cup of coffee from Earl's thermos. It was still warm. Then I unwrapped the sandwich. Turkey, Swiss cheese, mustard, simple, perfect. I ate standing beside the window. Outside, the fields had gone completely dark. The sky above them was filled with stars. No streetlights, no traffic, just wind and silence. I thought about everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Walter stealing from us, Victor Hartman's conspiracy, the oil beneath the land, the trust Harold had created. Walter and Victor circling the farm like wolves waiting for weakness. And then I thought about the fortress Harold had built around me. Helen with the legal documents, Earl watching the land, the FBI evidence in my wallet, the ethics clause waiting to trigger if Walter made one wrong move. I was 68 years old, sitting in a farmhouse with no electricity, no running water, and $25 million in oil buried beneath my feet. But for the first time since Harold died, I didn't feel alone. She had built walls around me, strong ones, and I was standing safely inside them. I finished the coffee and set the thermos back on the table. Then I walked over to the metal cot. Before lying down, I pulled Harold's letter from my pocket, the one I had found inside the trunk. I read the final line again. I love you more than I ever said. Trust the farm. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the lantern on the card table. On the windowsill sat a jar of water with 3 small stems I had cut from the yellow rose outside. In the lantern light, the petals glowed faintly gold. Outside, somewhere beyond the barn, a coyote howled. The wind rattled the screen door softly. I closed my eyes, one hand resting on Harold's letter. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. March 31st, 10 in the morning. The sound of tires crunching slowly over gravel pulled me out of sleep. For a moment, I stayed still listening. 2 vehicles had just arrived. One engine hummed quietly, smooth and expensive. The other was deeper, heavier, the unmistakable rumble of a diesel truck. I sat up on the cot and swung my feet to the floor. The farmhouse was still cool from the night air. I pulled on my boots, crossed the room, and looked out the window. A black Mercedes sedan sat near the front of the yard. Behind it, a silver Escalade. Walter stepped out of the Mercedes first. Suit, tie, sunglasses. He looked like he was heading into a boardroom meeting, instead of standing in the middle of a dusty farm. The driver's door of the Escalade opened next. The man who stepped out moved slowly but confidently. He looked to be about 70, maybe a little older. His gray hair was combed straight back, and he wore a charcoal vest over a crisp white shirt, with the sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. No tie, no jacket, the kind of man who didn't need one. He carried himself like someone used to giving orders. Victor Hartman. I stepped away from the window. Before heading outside, I picked up my phone from the card table and checked the recording I had saved 2 nights earlier. Still there. Good. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked out onto the porch. Walter saw me immediately. He removed his sunglasses. Dad, he called. We need to talk. No, I said calmly. We don't. Victor stepped forward before Walter could respond. He extended his hand toward me. Mr. Rutherford, he said in a smooth voice, my name is Victor Hartman. I operate an energy company based in Tulsa. I've been following the situation with your property, and I believe I can offer you a solution. I looked at his outstretched hand. Then I ignored it. How exactly do you plan to help? I asked. Victor's smile was thin and practiced. You're currently sitting on land that's worth far more than you realize, he said. The tax lien, the legal complications, the maintenance. It's a great deal of pressure for anyone, especially a man in your position. He paused. I'd like to make things simple for you. Walter shifted beside him. Victor continued. $10 million. Cash. Today. He gestured toward the farmhouse. You sign over the deed to this property. I take care of the tax lien, the legal issues, everything. You walk away completely free. I turned slowly toward Walter. You brought him here. Walter shifted uncomfortably. Dad, it's a good offer, he said. More than fair. You don't have to deal with the farm, the county, any of this stress. Take the money, move somewhere comfortable. Comfortable, I repeated quietly. Like Sunset Meadows. Walter's jaw tightened. Victor looked from Walter to me, clearly confused. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There's something I want you both to hear. I tapped the screen. Walter's voice filled the quiet morning air. Drilling rights, the whole section. If he figures out what's under that land. Another voice. Walter again. The guardianship petition is ready. Moss says we can file Monday if he refuses to sell. Once he's moved into that place in Elk City, I'd take control as conservator. After that, the land is ours. The recording ended. Walter had gone pale. Victor's smile vanished. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. That conversation happened 2 nights ago, I said calmly. Walter didn't realize I was standing in the hallway. Victor recovered first. Mr. Rutherford, he said stiffly. I'm not sure what you believe you heard, but I heard my own son planning to lock me in a nursing home. I said so he could steal my land and sell it to you. I looked directly at Walter. How much were you paying him? Walter didn't answer. $5 million, I continued. Vice president title at your company. Victor's tone hardened. You're making a mistake, he said. That land is worthless without proper equipment capital and expertise. I'm offering you $10 million today. He took a step closer. That's more money than you'll ever see otherwise. Worthless, I asked quietly. Then why are you here? Victor opened his mouth, stopped. Walter stepped forward suddenly. Dad, stop being stubborn, he snapped. The oil under this place, he froze. Too late. I smiled slightly. Oil, I repeated. You just said oil. Walter closed his eyes briefly. Victor turned toward him with a look sharp enough to cut steel. Then another engine sounded in the distance. A white SUV rolled slowly up the gravel drive, kicking up a cloud of dust. It stopped beside the Escalade. Helen Sinclair stepped out. She carried her leather briefcase and looked exactly as calm and composed as she always did. Behind her came a man in his mid-40s wearing khaki pants and a Navy Morrison Energy polo shirt. Helen walked directly toward me. "Good morning, Sam," she said pleasantly. "I see we have visitors." Victor straightened. "This is a private discussion, Helen. Not anymore," she replied. She opened her briefcase and removed 2 stacks of documents. The first she handed directly to Victor. "Cease and desist order," she said. Victor glanced down at the page. "You are prohibited from contacting Mr. Rutherford making financial offers regarding this property or conducting any business activity connected to this land." She folded her arms. "Violation of this order will result in immediate legal action." Victor looked up. On what grounds? Helen's voice remained steady. "The irrevocable trust created by Harold Rutherford specifically names you Mr. Hartman as a prohibited party under Section 47C. She pointed to the document. "Any attempt by Walter Rutherford to sell, transfer, or negotiate this property with you or any entity you control results in immediate forfeiture of Walter's inheritance." She paused. "And opens both of you to federal fraud charges." Victor's face went completely still. Helen turned to Walter. "The second set of documents is for you." Walter took them silently. "Notice of trust violation investigation," Helen said. "If you pursue a guardianship petition attempt, a power of attorney arrangement, or enter any business agreement involving Mr. Hartman, you lose everything." She spoke clearly. "The house in Southern Hills, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, all of it reverts immediately to your father." Walter stared down at the papers in his hands. Helen gestured toward the man beside her. "This is David Morrison, CEO of Morrison Energy." Morrison stepped forward and nodded respectfully. "Mr. Rutherford," he said, "your wife and I finalized a drilling partnership 6 months ago." He glanced briefly toward Victor. "Morrison Energy will begin drilling operations on this site within 60 days. He turned back to me. "You retain 75% of all net royalties." The agreement was formally executed yesterday under authority granted in Mrs. Rutherford's trust documents. Then he looked at Victor. "We've already filed our lease applications with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission." He paused. "Your competing applications have been denied." Victor said nothing, but his hands had curled into fists. Morrison continued. "Drilling begins in May. First production estimates place initial royalties arriving late next year." Silence settled over the yard. Victor turned slowly toward Walter. "You told me this was handled?" Walter didn't answer. Victor looked back at me one last time. "You'll regret this." "I doubt it," I said. Victor walked to the Escalade, climbed in, and drove away without another word. Walter remained standing in the dirt yard. The papers Helen had given him trembled slightly in his hands. He looked at me. For a moment it seemed like he might say something. Apologize, explain. But no words came. He folded the papers slowly and slipped them into his jacket pocket. Then he walked to the Mercedes. He sat there for a long moment, staring through the windshield at nothing. Finally the engine started. The car rolled down the gravel drive, and Walter disappeared down the road. I watched until the dust settled. Helen placed a hand lightly on my arm. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." David Morrison extended his hand. "It's good to finally meet you, Mr. Rutherford," he said. "Harold spoke about you often?" His voice softened. "I'm very sorry for your loss." I shook his hand. "Thank you." Helen closed her briefcase. "We'll return next week to review the drilling timeline," she said. "For now, rest. You've earned it." They drove away a few minutes later. The yard became quiet again, just the sound of wind moving through the wheat, and the yellow rose swaying gently on the porch. I sat down on the wooden steps and looked out across the fields. It was over. Walter was gone. Victor was gone, and somehow I was still standing. I whispered softly into the wind. "We did it, Harold." The breeze carried my voice across the fields, and for just a moment I thought I heard her answer. April 1st. 11 a.m., Helen and David Morrison sat across from me at the card table in the farmhouse. Earl had brought the table in that morning, along with 3 folding chairs, a cooler of bottled water, and a portable generator humming outside. The farmhouse finally had lights. Helen spread a set of documents across the table. "We need to talk about what happens next." I nodded. "Walter is going to fight this." "He already is." Helen pulled out her phone and turned it toward me. An email time-stamped 10:47 a.m. Sender Walter Rutherford. I read it. Helen, I am formally notifying you that I will file a probate challenge to my mother's will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. I will also file an emergency guardianship petition for my father, Stanley Rutherford, age 68, who is clearly unable to manage complex financial and operational decisions related to oil extraction. He is living without electricity or running water on a dilapidated property. This is elder neglect. I expect you to withdraw your cease and desist order and allow me to act in my father's best interest. Walter Rutherford. CPA. I set the phone down. He thinks I'm incompetent. He's trying to invalidate the trust, Helen said. And he's threatening guardianship again. But here's the problem for Walter. He can't do either without triggering the ethics clause. David Morrison leaned forward. What exactly is the ethics clause? Helen pulled a highlighted page from the trust document. Section 47C. Harold drafted this 18 months ago with the help of a federal prosecutor. It's ironclad. She looked at me. Sam, your wife knew Walter would try to contest the will, so she built a tripwire. How does it work? Helen pointed to the document. Walter inherited $12 million Mansion Investments retirement accounts, but that inheritance is conditional. If Walter takes any of the following actions, he forfeits the entire $12 million and exposes himself to federal prosecution. She read from the highlighted section. 1. Files any legal challenge to Harold Rutherford's will or trust documents. 2. Attempts to obtain guardianship conservatorship or power of attorney over Stanley Rutherford through fraudulent claims. 3. Enters into any business agreement, partnership, or transaction with Victor Hartman or any entity Victor controls. 4. Interferes with Morrison Energy's drilling operations or Stanley Rutherford's mineral rights. I stared at her. If he sues me, he loses everything. Everything, and worse. Helen turned the page. The trust includes a clause that automatically transfers all evidence of Walter's embezzlement and conspiracy to the FBI if he violates the ethics clause. Bank records, emails, wire transfers, surveillance footage. Harold documented everything. Wire fraud carries 5 to 10 years in federal prison. David whistled low. She trapped him. Completely. Helen folded her hands. Walter has 2 choices. He can walk away, keep his $12 million, and live quietly. Or he can fight, lose everything, and go to prison. I thought of Walter standing in the yard yesterday, staring at me, searching for forgiveness. He's not going to walk away. I know. Helen pulled out a blank document and began writing. That's why I'm sending him a 48-hour warning. If he files any petition by end of business, April 3rd, the ethics clause triggers immediately. I'll notify the probate court, the FBI, and the federal prosecutor Harold worked with. Walter will lose the inheritance within 72 hours, and the criminal investigation begins. Will that stop him? Helen looked at me. It should, but I've seen people make stupid decisions out of pride. She capped her pen. If Walter files, he's betting that a judge will side with him over a dead woman's wishes. That's a bad bet, but ego makes people reckless. David Morrison stood and walked to the window. What about Victor? He's not going to sit still. Victor's smarter than Walter, Helen said. He knows the trust blocks him. He'll try to work around it, buy adjacent parcels, lobby the drilling commission, file nuisance complaints. But he can't touch this land, and Morrison Energy already has the lease. David nodded. We start site prep next week. First drill rig arrives in May. Helen gathered the documents. Sam, I need to get this warning letter notarized and filed today. You'll have a copy by tonight. In the meantime, don't respond to Walter. Don't answer his calls. Don't engage. Let me handle it. What if he shows up here again? Call the sheriff. You have a no-contact order in place. If he violates it, he goes to jail. Helen zipped her briefcase. This is almost over. Walter has 48 hours to make a choice. My guess is he'll back down once he reads the consequences. She stood. David shook my hand. We'll be in touch, Mr. Rutherford. You're in good hands. They left. The generator hummed outside. The farmhouse was quiet. I sat alone at the table and reread the ethics clause summary Helen had left behind. If Walter Rutherford won, contests the will, 2 files for guardianship, 3 deals with Victor Hartman, or 4 interferes with mineral rights. Then Walter Rutherford forfeits $12,000. 000 inheritance and evidence transfers to FBI wire fraud Embezzlement conspiracy, 5 to 10 years. Federal prison. Harold had thought of everything. She'd built a legal cage around Walter so tight he couldn't move without destroying himself. But I knew my son. Pride didn't listen to logic. He'd spent 18 months planning to take this farm. He'd stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd tried to lock me in a nursing home. And yesterday he'd stood in this yard offering $10 million like he owned the place. Would he really walk away now? I thought of the email. I will file a probate challenge. Not I'm considering. Not I may. I will. Walter thought he could win. Thought a judge would look at me, 68, living in a farmhouse with no running water, and declare me incompetent. Thought he could override Harold's trust, take control, sell to Victor, and walk away rich. He didn't understand. The trust wasn't just a document. It was Harold's last stand, and she'd made it unbreakable. I folded the ethics clause summary and put it in my wallet next to her letters. Outside, the wind picked up. The yellow rose swayed on the porch. In the distance, a hawk circled over the wheat fields. 48 hours. By April 3rd, Walter would make his choice, and I'd find out if my son still had enough sense to save himself. I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the empty road. Walter thought he could win. Thought a judge would side with him. But he didn't understand the trust wasn't just a document. It was Harold's last stand, and she'd made it unbreakable. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked outside. 48 hours. April 3rd, 3 p.m. I was sitting on the porch steps watching the wheat fields bend in the wind when my phone rang. Helen Sinclair. Sam, it's over. I stood. What do you mean? Walter withdrew all petitions. His lawyer called me 20 minutes ago. Exact words. My client wishes to avoid further conflict and accepts the terms of the trust. Helen's voice was calm, but I heard the edge of satisfaction. No probate challenge, no guardianship petition, no contact with Victor Hartman. He's walking away. I sat back down. My chest loosened like a fist I'd been holding tight for weeks had finally unclenched. You're sure, Geek? Positive. I have the withdrawal notices in writing, signed by Walter and his attorney. Filed with the probate court 10 minutes ago. She paused. He also sent you an email. I'm forwarding it now. My phone buzzed. I opened the email. From walterrutherford.cpa@... to Sam Rutherford 1955 at ... date April 3rd, 2023, 2:43 p.m. Subject, final communication, Dad. My lawyer has advised me to withdraw all legal actions. I accept the terms of Mom's will. I keep the house, the investments, and the retirement accounts. You keep the farm. We're done. I don't want further conflict. I'm asking you don't contact me. I need to move forward with my life. Walter, I read it twice. Cold. Clinical. Like he was closing a business deal. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just, we're done. I thought of Harold's folders. The timeline. The surveillance photos. The emails to Victor. The Sunset Meadows contract signed while she was dying. I hit reply and typed. Walter, you stole from your mother while she was bedridden and dying. You forged her signature, lied to banks, and conspired with her competitor to lock me in a facility so you could sell land that wasn't yours. You planned all of this 18 months in advance. You're not my son. Don't contact me. If you do, I'll have Helen file the evidence with the FBI regardless of the ethics clause. You'll lose everything and go to prison. I'm blocking your number. Don't test me. Sam Rutherford, I sent it. Then I blocked Walter's number, his email, and Jessica's number. Helen was still on the line. Sam, I sent him a reply, then I blocked him. Silence. Then Helen said quietly, Good. Is that it? Is it really over? Yes, the trust is ironclad. Walter has no legal recourse. Victor can't touch the land. Morrison Energy has the lease. You're protected. She paused. Harold built this, Sam. She thought of everything. All you have to do now is live. Thank you, Helen. You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad she trusted me to help. Her voice softened. I'll be in touch next week about the drilling schedule. For now, rest. You've earned it. She hung up. I sat on the porch phone in my hand, staring at the blocked contact screen. Walter Rutherford. Son. Blocked. I thought I'd feel something, grief maybe. Regret. But all I felt was emptiness. Like a chapter I didn't want to read had finally ended. I thought of him as a kid, 8 years old, building a birdhouse in the garage with me, frustrated because the nails kept bending. I'd shown him how to hold the hammer, how to angle the strike. When he finally got it right, he'd looked up at me with this huge grin. "I did it, Dad." That boy was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years. Maybe he'd never really existed. I put the phone in my pocket and walked inside. An hour later, Earl showed up. I heard his truck pull into the yard, the door slam. He climbed the porch steps, a 6-pack of bottled water in one hand. "Heard you might need company," he said. I opened the door. "How'd you know?" "Helen called me," said Walter back down. "Figured you'd be sitting here alone thinking too much." He handed me the water. "Thought you could use a visitor." We sat on the porch steps. Earl cracked open a bottle, took a long drink. I did the same. For a while neither of us spoke, just the wind through the wheat, the creak of the barn door. Finally Earl said, "Harold told me something once, about Walter." I looked at him. This was back when she first got sick. She'd drive out here to check on the farm, and sometimes she'd stop by my station for coffee. One day she sat at the counter for an hour, just staring at her cup. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I'm trying to figure out when I lost my son." My throat tightened. Earl continued. I told her maybe she didn't lose him. Maybe he just chose a different path. She shook her head, said, "Walter was born wanting more money, more status, more proof that he mattered. I thought if I gave him enough, he'd be satisfied. But there's no enough. Not for him." Earl looked at me. Then she said, "That's his choice. Not my failure. Not Sam's failure. His." I stared at the wheat fields. I keep thinking I should have seen it, should have stopped it. "How?" Earl's voice was gentle but firm. "He's a grown man. He made his choices. Harold knew that." That's why she didn't confront him. She knew he wouldn't change. So she built walls to protect you instead. I nodded slowly. "She spent 2 years doing it." "Yeah, and it worked." Earl drained his bottle. "Walter is gone. You're still here. The farm's yours. That's what she wanted." We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then Earl stood, clapped me on the shoulder. "I'll check on you tomorrow. You need anything, call." "Thanks, Earl." He walked to his truck, paused at the door. "Sam?" "Yeah. Harold was proud of you. She told me that too." He climbed in and drove away. That night I sat at the card table with a pen and a notebook Earl had left behind. The generator hummed outside. The lantern cast warm light across the page. I wrote April 3rd, 2023. "Today I lost a son. Walter withdrew all legal challenges. He keeps the mansion, the investments, the $12 million. I keep the farm. We will never speak again." I thought I would feel grief, but I don't. I feel relief. He made his choices. He stole from Harold while she was dying. He conspired with her enemy. He tried to lock me away. Those were his choices, not mine. Harold knew. She saw it coming. She spent 2 years building walls to protect me, and it worked. I paused, stared at the page. Then I wrote, "Today I gained a future, 800 acres, an oil field worth millions, a partnership that will let me live the rest of my life without fear. A legacy Harold left because she loved me. I'm 68 years old. I'm starting over. And for the first time in months, I'm not afraid." I set the pen down and closed the notebook. Outside, the wind rattled the screen door. The yellow rose swayed on the porch. I thought of Harold in her hard hat, standing in the wheat field, saying, "This land has been good to us, Sam. It's got one more gift left." She'd been right. I turned off the lantern, lay down on the cot, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, Morrison Energy would start site prep. Tomorrow, the future would begin. But tonight I just rested. May 1st, 10 in the morning. David Morrison's white Morrison Energy pickup rolled slowly into the farmhouse yard, gravel crackling beneath the tires. I was already sitting on the porch, a half-empty mug of coffee warming my hands, as I watched the wheat fields ripple under the morning sun. The green had started turning gold over the past few days, a quiet signal that spring was giving way to summer. David stepped out of the truck with a leather briefcase tucked under his arm. He climbed the porch steps and offered his hand. "Morning, Mr. Rutherford," he said. "Ready to make this official?" I set the coffee mug aside and stood. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Inside the farmhouse, we sat at the card table beneath the window. Dust drifted lazily through the light as David opened his briefcase and removed a thick stack of papers. He spread the contract across the table, 30 pages at least, neatly organized with colored tabs marking the places I needed to sign. "This," he said, tapping the first page, "is the drilling partnership agreement Harold and I finalized last October. I'd like to walk you through the key points. I leaned forward and pulled the contract closer. First, David began, Morrison Energy covers the entire cost of drilling operations. The estimated total investment is between $8 and $10 million. I raised my eyebrows. You won't be paying a cent, he continued. We handle everything, permits, equipment, labor, transportation, site preparation. Your role is simply to own the land. I nodded slowly. Second, he said, turning the page, you retain full ownership of the farm. The lease grants us rights to extract minerals, but the land itself stays yours. If you ever decide to sell the property someday, the royalty agreement transfers with the deed. Okay, I said quietly. Third, David continued, you receive 75% of net royalties. He paused for emphasis. That's after operational costs are deducted maintenance transport taxes. It's an extraordinary percentage, frankly almost unheard of in this industry. He gave a small smile. Harold negotiated very hard for that. For a moment, I pictured her sitting across from him months earlier, thin from chemotherapy, pale but stubborn, refusing to back down. How much does that actually mean? I asked. David flipped to another page. The geological surveys estimate recoverable reserves around $25 million over the life of the field. Production could last anywhere from 20 to 30 years, depending on extraction rates. He looked directly at me. Based on current projections, you're likely looking at $2 to $3 million per year in royalties. 2 to 3 million. Every year. For a long moment, I said nothing. David turned another page. Fourth, he said gently, Harold arranged a temporary income structure to support you while drilling begins. He pointed at a section in the contract. There's a trust fund containing $500,000. It's being managed by Sterling Wealth. Beginning July 1st, it will generate approximately $4,200 per month. I blinked. That's your income during the drilling phase. Once production begins, likely about 18 months from now, you'll start receiving quarterly royalty checks, in addition to the trust income, $4,200 a month. More than double what my teacher's pension had ever paid. You okay? David asked. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, it's just a lot to take in. He nodded. I understand. But this is exactly what Harold wanted. He slid the final page toward me. I just need your signature here, here, and here. Once that's done, we file the agreement with the state, and drilling begins May 15th. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled slightly as I signed each line, but the signatures were clear. David added his own signature and carefully organized the paperwork into a folder before handing it to me. Congratulations, Mr. Rutherford, he said with a grin. You're officially an oil man. I let out a short laugh. I spent 40 years teaching history, I said. I don't know a thing about oil. David stood and shook my hand again. You don't need to, he said. That's what we're here for. He closed his briefcase. The crew will arrive next week. I'll keep you informed every step of the way. After he drove off, the farmhouse fell quiet again. I sat alone at the table staring at the contract. 75%. $2 to $3 million a year. $4,200 a month starting in July. Harold had built this. While I was holding her hand at night, reading to her in the dim light of the bedroom, she had been building a future I didn't even know existed. I carefully folded the contract and placed it inside the trunk beside her letters. May 15th, 7 in the morning. I woke to the rumble of diesel engines and the echo of men shouting across the fields. Pulling on my jeans, I stepped outside. The empty land behind the barn had transformed overnight. Flatbed trucks carried steel beams and drilling pipe. A crane towered over the site while workers in bright safety vests unloaded equipment. Nearly 20 men moved quickly across the field, setting up barriers and positioning machinery. A broad-shouldered man in his 50s approached me. You Mr. Rutherford? He asked. Yeah. Caleb Miller, site foreman. His handshake was firm. We're setting up the first derrick today. Should have it operational by the end of the week. That fast? He chuckled. Mrs. Rutherford already did 90% of the work. Permits were filed months ago. Geological surveys completed. Site prep mapped out. He pointed toward a cluster of orange survey flags 200 yards away. She picked that exact location herself. October 22nd, 2022. I stared at the flags. October, only weeks after she'd discovered Walter stealing from her. While she was gathering evidence and preparing legal traps, she had also been planning this. She was thorough, I said quietly. Caleb nodded. Best client I've ever worked with. He clapped my shoulder. We'll do right by her. You'll see. I spent the rest of the day watching the construction. By evening, the skeleton of the derrick rose 30 feet into the air, steel beams forming a towering outline against the sky. Around 6 o'clock, Earl pulled into the yard with sandwiches. We sat on the porch steps together while the crew bolted crossbeams into place. Harold would have loved seeing this, Earl said. Yeah, I said softly. Heard Morrison's hiring local workers too. 10 full-time jobs, 20 seasonal. That's good. Earl grinned. My gas station's been busier this week than the last 6 months combined. He nudged my shoulder. You're a job creator now, Sam. I laughed. Never thought I'd hear that. We sat quietly as the sun sank behind the wheat fields, the derrick silhouetted against a sky burning orange. July 25th, 2 in the afternoon. I was repairing the porch railing when a shout rose from the drill site. Then another, then cheering. I dropped the hammer and hurried across the field. The entire crew had gathered around the base of the derrick. Men were slapping each other's backs, laughing and shouting. Caleb saw me approaching. We hit it, he yelled. I pushed through the crowd. At the base of the derrick, a black liquid flowed into a metal collection tray. Thick, shiny, unmistakable. Oil. Caleb grinned like a kid. Preliminary estimate 800 barrels a day. That's strong production, Mr. Rutherford. Real strong. I stared down at the dark pool. It didn't look like $2 million a year. It looked like mud, but it wasn't mud. It was my future. How long until full production, I asked. 6 weeks to complete extraction systems, Caleb said. But your first royalty check should start coming in about a year. Around me, the crew celebrated high fives, laughter, someone cracking open a cooler of beer. But I stood quietly beside the derrick. Harold had known this was here. She'd protected it. And she'd won. July 28th, evening. The whiskey barrel on the porch had cracked from the summer heat, so I dug a proper hole beside the steps and replanted the yellow rose bush. Earl had brought compost earlier that morning. I mixed it into the soil and carefully lowered the plant into the ground. The bush had grown strong over the past months, bright green leaves, several new buds beginning to form. I watered the roots until the soil turned dark. Then I sat on the porch steps and looked out across the fields. Floodlights now illuminated the drilling site. The hum of machinery drifted through the night air as crews worked late shifts finishing the extraction systems. Beyond the derrick, the sun was sinking low over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold. I walked slowly toward the derrick. Clear pipes carried thick black oil into a large storage tank nearby. The steady flow made a low humming sound that vibrated through the steel structure. I placed my hand against the cold metal beam. 75% of everything flowing through those pipes belonged to me. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to build something meaningful. I pictured Harold standing right here in her hard hat months ago, pointing at geological maps and telling David Morrison exactly where to drill. The wind rustled through the wheat. I whispered softly into the evening air. Thank you, Harold. The derrick hummed steadily behind me. Oil flowed through the pipes. And for the first time since she had passed away, I finally felt whole again. August 10th, 6 p.m. I was sitting on the porch watching the derrick lights flicker on as the sun set when Earl's truck pulled into the yard. He climbed out, phone in hand. You seen the news? Walkman, no. Why? He held up his phone. A video was playing local Tulsa news reporter, standing in front of a glass office building downtown. The Chiron read, oil exec arrested, federal charges. I took the phone. The reporter's voice was crisp, professional. Victor Hartman, CEO of Hartman Oil and Gas, was arrested this morning by FBI agents at his Tulsa headquarters. Federal prosecutors have charged Hartman with wire fraud conspiracy to commit fraud and industrial espionage. According to court documents unsealed today, the investigation began in late 2021 and was based on evidence provided by Harold Caldwell Rutherford, founder of Morrison Energy Solutions, who served as a confidential FBI informant until her passing in February of this year. I stopped the video, stared at the screen. Harold, FBI informant. Earl watched me. You didn't know. No, she was working with them the whole time. I handed the phone back, my hands numb. She never told me. Probably didn't want to put you at risk. Earl pocketed the phone. Victor's going down, Sam. Federal case. They don't arrest guys like him unless it's airtight. I nodded slowly. My chest felt tight. Harold had been fighting a war on two fronts Walter and Victor and I hadn't known about either until she was gone. Earl squeezed my shoulder. I'll leave you be. Call if you need anything. He left. I sat on the porch steps staring at the derrick trying to make sense of it. 20 months, September 2021 to February 2023. The whole time she was sick, she'd been feeding evidence to the FBI, meeting with agents, building a case, and she'd never said a word. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Rutherford. This is Special Agent Sarah Thompson, FB, White Collar Crime Division. I believe you have my card. I pulled out my wallet, the card from the insurance box. Yeah, I have it. We need to talk. Can I come out to the farm this afternoon? Okay. She arrived at 2, mid-40s dark suit badge clipped to her belt. She shook my hand businesslike but not unkind. We sat at the card table. She opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Your wife contacted us in September 2021. She'd discovered evidence that Victor Hartman was engaged in industrial espionage, stealing proprietary geological data, bribing county officials, attempting to manipulate lease auctions. She also informed us that her son was involved. I nodded. I know. I found the folders. The blue folder, Victor Hartman Conspiracy. Yeah, that's what we used to build the case. Your wife was meticulous. Every email, every wire transfer, every meeting, she documented it all. She met with us monthly for 20 months. Even after her diagnosis, she insisted on continuing. Torres closed the folder. She was one of the most dedicated informants I've ever worked with. My throat tightened. What happens now? We've arrested Victor. He's being held without bail. Trial's set for next spring. We expect a conviction. The evidence is overwhelming. He's looking at 15 to 20 years federal prison. And Walter, Torres' expression shifted slightly. We approached him 3 days ago, offered immunity in exchange for testimony against Victor. He accepted. I stared at her. He gets nothing. No prison time. Immunity means he testifies truthfully, and we don't prosecute him for conspiracy or wire fraud. But he's not walking away clean. He'll lose his CPA license. His reputation's finished. And if he lies on the stand, the immunity deal voids and we charge him with perjury on top of everything else. I nodded slowly. Walter would testify. He'd throw Victor under the bus to save himself. It was exactly what I expected. We'll need your testimony too, Torres said. You're a victim, the embezzlement, the guardianship scheme, the nursing facility contract. Your testimony corroborates your wife's evidence. When? Next week. We'll depose you at my office in Oklahoma City. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. Okay. She stood, handed me her card again. If Walter contacts you, don't engage. Let me know immediately. The immunity deal prohibits him from interfering with witnesses. He won't contact me. I blocked him. Good. She shook my hand. Your wife did an incredible thing, Mr. Rutherford. She protected you, built a case, and took down one of the most corrupt operators in Oklahoma oil. You should be proud of her. I am. She left. I sat alone at the table, staring at the folder she'd left behind, a copy of Harold's FBI statements, transcripts of her meetings, photos of Victor's office emails between Walter and Victor. 20 months. She'd carried this alone. August 13th. My phone rang. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Dad, it's Walter. I need to talk to you. The FBI came to me. They're offering immunity if I testify. I don't know what to do. Can you call me back, please? I deleted the voicemail. August 18th, Helen called. Sam, I wanted you to hear it from me. Walter signed the immunity deal. He's testifying against Victor in exchange for no prison time. But the state bar revoked his CPA license this morning. He's also been fired from his consulting firm. It's all over the Tulsa Business News. Good. There's more. He tried to sell the Southern Hills house. No buyers. The scandal's attached to his name now. He's radioactive. I thought of the mansion, the mahogany table where Helen had read the will, the office Walter had demolished. He made his choices. Yes, he did. Helen paused. How are you doing? I'm okay. Oil production's on schedule. Yeah, Carlos says we're on track for first royalty checks next summer. Good. I'll check in next month. She hung up. I stood, walked to the bedroom, and pulled open the drawer of the card table. Inside was the last photo I had of Walter High School graduation, 1993 cap and gown, grinning at the camera. I'd kept it through everything. Through the eviction, the POA, the confrontation. I'd told myself it was a reminder of who he used to be, but that boy was gone. Maybe he'd never existed. I tore the photo in half, then in quarters. I walked outside and dropped the pieces into the burn barrel Earl had set up last month. I struck a match, dropped it in. The photo curled and blackened. Smoke rose into the evening air. I stood there watching it burn and whispered, "You chose your path. I chose mine." The smoke drifted across the wheat fields. The derrick hummed in the distance. The yellow rose swayed on the porch. I turned and walked inside. Tomorrow I'd drive to Oklahoma City and give my testimony. Tomorrow I'd help put Victor Hartman in prison. But tonight I was done with Walter, for good. September 15th, 2024. The mail carrier knocked on the farmhouse door at exactly 10 in the morning. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. Most days the mailbox brought nothing but routine utility bills, advertisements for tractor parts, flyers from farm supply stores. But today she stood on the porch holding a thick certified envelope. "Mornin', Sam," she said. "Mornin'." She handed it to me. The envelope felt heavier than normal mail official somehow. The return address read, Morrison Energy Solutions, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I signed the receipt on her clipboard. When she drove away, I closed the door and walked back to the card table beneath the window. My hands were already trembling when I tore the envelope open. Inside were two things, a check and a 2-page royalty statement. I unfolded the report first. The heading was crisp and formal. Morrison Energy Solutions, royalty statement, period. Q, 2/20/24, April 1st to June 30th. Property, Rutherford Farm. Section 14, Township, 25. North Range, 8 East, Osage County. Oklahoma below, that were the numbers. Production 72,000 barrels, average price per barrel $68. Zero. Gross revenue, $4,896,000. Operating costs, $1,200,000. Net revenue, $3,696,000. Stanley Rutherford royalty, 75%, $2,772,000. I stared at the final line, $2,772,000, for 3 months. My eyes drifted slowly to the check. It was real blue Morrison Energy logo in the corners, crisp paper, my name typed neatly across the payee line, $2,772,000. Zero. I set it down carefully on the table, almost afraid the number might disappear if I blinked too hard. For nearly 20 minutes, I didn't move. Outside, the generator hummed steadily. Through the window, I could see the derrick standing tall in the field behind the barn, sunlight glinting off the steel beams. A crow landed on the porch railing, tilted its head toward the house, cawed once, and flew away. Finally, I reached for my phone and called Helen. She answered on the second ring. "Sam, everything okay?" The check came. The royalty check. Her voice brightened. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations." "Helen," I said, slowly staring at the number again. "What am I supposed to do with this?" She paused. "What do you want to do with it?" I turned my head toward the window. The derrick hummed quietly in the distance. The wheat fields rolled toward the horizon. The yellow rosebush at the corner of the porch was blooming again, bright against the autumn sky. "I want to do what Harold would have done," I said. Helen's voice softened. "Then I think you already know the answer." And I did. November 2024. I sat in Helen's office with a yellow legal pad covered in scribbled notes. She had invited another attorney to the meeting, a non-profit specialist named Laura Brennan. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, efficient, and clearly used to dealing with large charitable funds. "You're absolutely certain about this?" Laura asked. $1 million is a serious starting commitment for a foundation. "I'm certain," I said. "All right," she said, leaning forward. "Tell me what you're envisioning." I flipped to the first page of my notes. 3 pillars, I said. Laura wrote the words down. Education, business, health. "Explain," she said. "Education scholarships first." I continued. $5,000 each for students in Osage County who want to go to college but can't afford it. Priority fields, science, engineering, business. I paused. Fields Harold worked in. Laura nodded approvingly. "That's straightforward to administer." She wrote a few more notes. "What's the second pillar, small business grants?" She raised an eyebrow. "How much? $20,000 each." Her pen stopped briefly. "No interest," I added. "No repayment required." "What's the condition?" "They hire locally," I said. Laura nodded. "We can structure those as conditional forgivable loans. That protects the foundation while encouraging growth. She looked back up, and the third pillar, I leaned back in the chair for a moment. Cancer support. The room went quiet. Harold fought cancer for 18 months, I said quietly. I watched the bills pile up, treatments, medications, travel to specialists. I shook my head. A lot of families can't afford that fight. Laura's expression softened. So, you want to help cover medical costs, medical bills, travel, lodging for families who need to stay near treatment centers. She nodded slowly. That will require hospital partnerships and verification systems. Then let's build them, I said. She smiled faintly. That's what you're paying me for? Right, exactly. She flipped to a fresh page. What's the seed funding? $1 million to start. Helen leaned forward slightly. Sam, she said, with your quarterly royalties, you'll likely add another $10 million to the foundation within 2 years. Good, I said simply. Then we can help more people. Laura closed her notebook. One last question. What's the foundation called? I didn't even hesitate. The Harold Caldwell Rutherford Foundation. April 12th, 2025. The Osage County Community Center was packed. At least 150 people filled the folding chairs, students, parents, teachers, local business owners. A large banner stretched across the stage. Harold Caldwell Rutherford Foundation, First Annual Scholarship Awards. Backstage. I stood with my hands in my pockets, peering through the curtain. 50 students sat in the front rows. 50 teenagers wearing their best clothes, nervous, hopeful, excited. 50 young people who had applied for scholarships. And today every one of them would receive $5,000. Helen touched my arm. You ready? I nodded. Yeah. I walked out onto the stage. The room quieted almost instantly. I stood behind the podium and looked out at the audience, young faces full of possibility parents, gripping cameras, teachers smiling proudly. My name is Sam Rutherford, I began. Most of you don't know me, but many of you knew my wife Harold. I paused. She grew up 20 miles from here. She worked in these oil fields for 40 years. She built a company that employed hundreds of people, and she never forgot where she came from. I gripped the edge of the podium. Harold believed something very simple, I continued. Wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away. The room was silent. She believed in second chances, I said, in hard work, in helping people who just need a little push to get started. I glanced down at my notes, then looked back up. Today we're awarding 50 scholarships, $5,000 each. That's $250,000 total. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. It won't pay for everything I said, but it's a start. I smiled slightly. And here's the only thing I ask in return. Make her proud, study hard, work hard, and when you reach your destination, remember where you came from. Help the next kid who needs a chance. The room erupted into applause. I stepped back while Helen began calling the names. One by one, the students walked across the stage. Some smiled nervously, some cried. One young man shook my hand so hard my shoulder nearly popped. Another girl hugged me so tightly I almost lost my balance. The final name Helen called was Emily Thatcher. She walked onto the stage, slowly, hands trembling slightly. 18 years old. Dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She accepted the envelope and looked up at me. Thank you, Mr. Rutherford, she said softly. I want to study petroleum engineering. She swallowed, like Mrs. Rutherford. I want to be like her. For a moment, I saw Harold again standing beside that first derrick back in 1996, wearing a hard hat and grinning like she'd just discovered gold. I smiled gently. Don't be like me, Emily, I said. Be better. Be like her. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded and walked off the stage. After the ceremony ended, parents crowded around the stage, shaking my hand and thanking me. I smiled. I nodded. I said the right words. But inside my mind, I was somewhere else. I was back in that hospital room, holding Harold's hand, listening to her whisper, "Trust the farm." She had been right. The farm had given me everything. And now, I was giving it back. That night, I stood on the farmhouse porch again. The derrick lights blinked steadily in the distance. Beside me, the yellow rosebush swayed in the evening breeze, fully in bloom, bright as sunlight, even in the fading light. I thought about the 50 students holding their scholarship envelopes, 50 futures that might never have existed without Harold's vision. My eyes filled with tears, the first tears I'd shed since she passed. I whispered softly into the wind, "Harold, this is your legacy. The breeze carried my voice across the fields. The derrick hummed, and for the first time in 2 years, I knew I was finally living the life she had built for me, and making sure it mattered. February 28th, 2026. Dawn. I stood in the rose garden, breath misting in the cold air. 70 years old today. 3 years since Harold passed. The garden had grown. 50 bushes now planted in neat rows along a stone path Earl had helped me lay last summer. At the center stood a wooden bench, simple but sturdy, with a brass plaque bolted to the backrest, Harold's Garden. It was late February. The roses were dormant bare branches dark against the gray sky. But if you looked close, you could see the buds forming tiny green tight as fists. In a month, they'd bloom. Yellow, bright as sunlight. I sat on the bench and looked out at the farm. The derrick stood tall in the east field lights blinking steady. Beyond it, the wheat was winter-planted ankle-high and green. The farmhouse had a new roof, new windows, a generator that didn't sputter out every third night. The barn had been rebuilt, red paint, straight walls, no rust. 3 years ago, I'd been 70 pounds lighter, homeless sitting in a guest room with an eviction notice and a rusted key. No money. No plan. Just Harold's voice in my head. Trust the farm. Now, the farm was worth $25 million. Oil royalties came in every quarter, $7.5 million a year, steady as clockwork. The foundation had given away $3 million, 150 scholarships, 60 business grants, 200 cancer patients helped with medical bills. I thought about Walter. Last I'd heard through Helen, who still tracked these things, he'd burned through $6 million, $3 million on cryptocurrency schemes that collapsed, $2 million gambling in Vegas, $1 million on a consulting firm that folded after 8 months. Now he was living in Phoenix selling used cars. Jessica had left him. The Southern Hills house had finally sold, but the money was gone. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel anything. Victor Hartman was in federal prison. 15-year sentence. He'd be 85 when he got out. If he got out. I heard footsteps on the gravel path. Earl appeared, thermos in hand. 75 now, moving slower, but still showing up every week. "Morning, Sam." "Morning." He sat beside me, poured coffee into the thermos cap, handed it over. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky lighten. "Heard from the university," Earl said. "Emily Thatcher is doing real good. Petroleum engineering, top of her class." I nodded. "That's what this is all about. Harold would be proud." "Yeah." Earl finished his coffee, stood. "I'll let you be. Just wanted to check in." "Thanks, Earl." He walked back to his truck engine, rumbling to life gravel, crunching as he drove away. I pulled a pen and a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for a week, not sure what to write. Now I knew. I wrote, "Harold, today is February 28th, 2026. 3 years since you left. I'm 70 years old. The farm is thriving. The oil field you found is producing $7.5 million a year. The foundation has helped over 400 people. Walter burned through his inheritance. He's selling used cars in Phoenix. Victor's in prison. They both made their choices. I miss you. I think about you every day. I see you in the yellow roses and the derrick lights and every scholarship check we send out. But I'm okay. I'm better than okay. You made sure of that. You spent 2 years building walls around me, protecting me, planning for this. And it worked. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know what I'm doing with it. I'm living the life you built for me, and I'm making sure it matters. Thank you for everything, for 40 years, for this farm, for believing I could do this. I love you. Sam." I folded the letter, walked back to the farmhouse, and unlocked the trunk. Inside were Harold's letters, the one from the will reading the one from the barn attic, the notes she'd left in folders. I placed my letter on top, closed the lid, and locked it. Then I walked back outside into the garden and watched the sun rise over the wheat fields. 3 years, a lifetime, a beginning. The roses would bloom soon, and I'd be here to see them. February 28th, 2026. I woke at 6 as I had every morning for 3 years. The farmhouse no longer creaked. I'd hired Earl's nephew to shore up the joists last spring. The yellow roses. Harold planted the ones I dug up from the mansion garden and replanted here, were dormant, now their branches bare against the gray sky. But in a few weeks they'd bloom again. They always did. I poured coffee, opened the kitchen window, and heard the low hum of 10 oil derricks across the east field. The sound had become as familiar as my own breathing, 3 years ago, this land had looked worthless, a patch of dirt nobody wanted. Today it was producing enough oil to change lives far beyond these 800 acres, reaching families in 3 states who'd never heard of Osage County or a woman named Harold Rutherford. Harold had left me 3 gifts. The first was the farm itself, a lesson that value isn't always visible on the surface. Sometimes you have to dig deep past the weeds and rust and rot to find what's really there. The second was fortune proof that money without integrity is just paper numbers on a screen that vanish the moment you stop protecting them. The third was purpose, the understanding that legacy isn't built after you die. It's built while you're still breathing, one decision at a time, one life at a time. Walter had received $12 million in cash investments and property. He'd burned through $6 million in 2 years, $3 million on a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed within 8 months. $2 million gambling in Vegas casinos, where they knew him by name. $1 million on a failed consulting firm that never landed a single client. His wife Jessica left him, last fall took their dog, and moved back to her parents' place in Edmond. Now Walter sells used cars in Phoenix, living in a 1-bedroom apartment he rents month to month, working for a dealership that pays him on commission. Victor Hartman sits in a federal prison in Oklahoma, serving year 3 of a 15-year sentence. His oil empire, the one he'd spent 30 years building, was dissolved by court order. His name, once respected in boardrooms across the Southwest, is mud. His assets were seized, his partnerships dissolved, his reputation destroyed. I feel no anger toward either of them anymore, only gratitude. They'd given me a gift without knowing it. They'd shown me exactly who I didn't want to become. The foundation Harold envisioned is thriving. I live on $60,000 a year, enough for groceries, utilities, and the occasional dinner in Tulsa. The rest, about $7.5 million annually, goes directly to the Harold Caldwell Rutherford Fund. Over the past 3 years, we've awarded scholarships to kids who couldn't afford college-launched small businesses, for families who couldn't get bank loans, and helped families facing cancer treatment costs they couldn't pay. Hundreds of lives have been touched. Thousands more will be in the decades ahead. Yesterday, Earl stopped by with a thermos of his wife's sweet tea. He's 75 now, still sharp as a tack, still checking the fences every morning, like Harold asked him to. He brought news Emily Thatcher, the young woman who'd reminded me so much of Harold at the first scholarship ceremony 2 years ago, was topping her petroleum engineering class at the University of Oklahoma. She'd graduate in 2029. Earl said probably start her own firm within 5 years after that. That's what this is all about, I told him, staring out at the derricks. Earl nodded slowly. Harold knew, he said. She always knew. We sat on the porch in silence for a while, watching the derricks pump in steady rhythm. Do you ever regret it? Earl finally asked. Not forgiving Walter. I thought about that question, turned it over in my mind the way Harold used to turn over rocks looking for fossils. I regret that he made forgiveness impossible, I said. But I don't regret protecting what Harold built. She fought a war I didn't even know was happening. The least I could do was finish it. Earl stood to leave, clapped me on the shoulder with his calloused hand. She picked the right man, he said quietly. That evening, I walked out to the east field as the sun dropped low. Caleb Miller, the drilling foreman, Morrison Energy hired 3 years ago, met me by well number 11, the newest one brought online just last month. We hit 1,200 barrels a day on this one. Sam, he said, grinning wide enough to show the gap in his front teeth. Biggest strike yet. Your wife knew what she was doing. I stared at the black pool shimmering under the floodlights, the oil flowing steady and strong. 1,200 barrels a day. Harold had mapped this exact spot herself, 2 months before she died, marked it on a geological survey with a red circle and the words, "Drill here first." She'd known it was here all along. She'd be proud, Carlos said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was too tight. In the field's northeast corner stands a granite plaque we installed last spring. Harold Caldwell Rutherford, 1959 to 2023. Geologist, visionary, wife. Beneath her name, the words she'd written in her final letter. She trusted the farm, it trusted her back. I knelt in the dirt-brushed dust from the stone with my sleeve and placed a dried yellow rose at its base, one I'd pressed last summer between the pages of her old geology textbook. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of diesel and soil and something else I couldn't name. For a moment, I felt her beside me, not in any mystical way, but in the work we'd done together, the lives we'd changed, the legacy we'd built, one scholarship and one well at a time. Tomorrow, I'll drive into Tulsa for the Foundation's quarterly board meeting. We'll review scholarship applications, approve business grants, plan next year's ceremony. Emily Thatcher will probably be there. She volunteers now, mentoring younger students the way Harold once mentored her. Walter will still be in Phoenix selling cars. Victor will still be in prison staring at concrete walls until 2038. And I'll keep waking at 6, walking the garden, checking the wells, writing letters to Harold that no one will ever read but me. 3 years ago, I was 68 homeless and holding a key to a farm I'd never seen. Everyone told me the land was worthless. They were wrong. The farm wasn't the treasure. The fight for it was. And the man Harold loved had learned at last to trust not just the land, but the woman who'd seen what he could not. And the farm had trusted him back. I'm 70 years old now, and when people ask what this family story taught me, I always give the same answer: don't make the mistake I did. Don't wait until a crisis forces you to realize what truly matters. Life has a strange way of revealing truth only when everything seems to be falling apart. And sometimes it's in those darkest moments that a person finally discovers who they really are. What happened in this family story might sound like a dad revenge tale, but the truth is, it was never about revenge. It was about protection. It was about honoring the woman who spent her final years quietly building a shield around me when I didn't even realize I needed one. Some people might call what happened justice, but for me, it was love. And if there's one lesson I can offer, it's this: never let family betrayal turn your heart bitter. Walter chose his path, and I chose mine. The difference is simple. I chose purpose over resentment. The deeper lesson behind this experience is something many people forget. Wealth without integrity is empty. Money is only a tool, never a trophy. What truly defines a person isn't how much they accumulate, but what they choose to do with it. Harold understood that better than anyone. She didn't just leave me land or oil beneath the soil. She left me a direction, a purpose, a way to turn hardship into something meaningful. If there is any kind of dad revenge hidden inside this family story, it's this: when people try to destroy you through family betrayal, the most powerful response isn't anger. It's building something so meaningful, so lasting, that their cruelty eventually fades into irrelevance. Because real victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving that goodness can still grow where bitterness once lived. Scholarships were created, businesses were launched, cancer patients found support when they needed it most. That to me is the true answer to family betrayal. And faith plays its part too. The Lord works in ways we often don't understand at first. Harold's illness once looked like the end of everything, but in truth it became the beginning of something greater. Sometimes all we can do is trust. Trust in God, trust in the people who truly love us, and sometimes even trust in the ground beneath our feet. This story may be ending here, but your story is still being written. Protect the things that matter most. Build something that outlives you. And when life confronts you with betrayal, as it eventually does for many people, remember that you always have a choice. You can choose bitterness, or you can choose purpose. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Now go out and build your own legacy. Make it something that truly matters. And before you leave, I'd really love to hear from you. What would you do if you found yourself in Sam's situation, discovering a hidden future while facing family betrayal from your own child? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one. And just a gentle reminder, while this narrative draws inspiration from real themes like inheritance, oil field fortunes, and personal conflict, some elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this kind of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better. Either way, thank you for being here and spending this time with me.